Chapter 1858. Hu Guang had been under a lot of pressure lately. He realized that ever since the banquet, he hadn't had a single day of peace. Putting aside the loss of Yu Yao and the many cultivators from the constellations, there was actually a problem on the island as well. For some reason, the energy seeping out from the sea had suddenly increased greatly, causing him to have no choice but to adjust the power of the protective Grand Formations several times. At this point, the Grand Formation that had protected Zixuan for tens of thousands of years was practically in a state of overload. Even so, it still couldn't consume more energy. He had no choice but to try the method Lionheart had suggested. He took the initiative to open up a gap in the Great Formation, allowing the island's energy to escape and reduce the pressure on the Great Formation. The results were obvious. After the gap was opened, the Great Formation finally stabilized. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. The Great Formation was a hole, and a gap meant a flaw, even if the gap was only about 10 feet wide. Normally, this flaw wouldn't be a problem, but now that Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was eyeing it covetously, Hu Guang had to be on guard. Just as he was thinking about how to solve the island's problem, he suddenly sensed an unusual change. He sensed it carefully, and his expression changed. Oh no! The energy on the island was increasing rapidly for some reason. He even saw a thin layer of energy fog forming. This undoubtedly meant that the energy on the island had reached an unimaginable level. This kind of cultivation environment was every cultivator's dream. If one could cultivate in such an environment, their efficiency would definitely increase by several times or even tens of times. If such a good thing happened on the Zixuan demon planet, Hu Guang would probably laugh his head off. However, this was only a spiritual island on the 10,000 manifestations sea. The Great Formation was the foundation of a force that occupied a spiritual island. Therefore, the first thing he had to consider was the pressure this sudden increase in energy was putting on the Great Formation. He hurriedly flew in a certain direction and quickly arrived at his destination. This was a node of the Great Formation, and several Yao cultivators were guarding it. When Hu Guang arrived, these Yao cultivators were in a state of panic. This was because the gap in the Great Formation, which was originally only 10 feet wide, had now been torn to 10 feet wide by the sudden increase in energy. Moreover, the gap was still increasing in length. The gap in the Great Array couldn't be opened casually. It required the monster cultivator to take the initiative to do so. Originally, with their joint efforts, they could maintain the stability of the 10 feet gap, but the changes on the island were obviously beyond their ability to deal with. Seeing Hu Guang arrive, one of the Yao cultivators hastily shouted, "Second Island Master." Hu Guang did not speak. His body flashed forward, and he took out a large array jade pendant. He waved it in front of him, and a mysterious light shot out from the jade pendant, landing near the gap. Immediately, the energy around his body surged, and the jade pendant in his hand flickered. It was visible to the naked eye that the gap that was constantly tearing apart was slowly stabilizing. The pressure on the few constellation demon cultivators was also greatly reduced. They all let out a long breath and looked at Hu Guang, their faces full of admiration. However, Hu Guang did not relax at all. Instead, his expression was solemn. After taking over the nodes of the formation, he could feel the pressure of the formation more clearly than before. It was a pressure that he could not imagine at all. Logically speaking, with such a gap, the energy on the island, no matter how rich it was, should be able to leak out. However, in fact, the energy that leaked out from the gap could not match the increase in energy. Even with Hu Guang's experience, he did not know what had happened under the 10,000 elephant sea that caused such a terrifying energy to leak out. Moreover, the location was on Purple Jade Island. Lionheart and Bao Yuyu noticed the situation here and hurried over to investigate. After communicating with Hu Guang, they both realized the seriousness of the problem. Even so, they had no way to solve it. It had to be said that this was simply the biggest joke in the world. As time passed, the energy fog on the island became more and more obvious. Originally, it was only a thin layer that could not be seen if one did not look carefully, but now, the energy fog had even spread to the ankles and was still increasing. In such an environment, even if they did not actively cultivate, the monster cultivators could feel the pure energy pouring into their bodies, helping to improve their strength. Hu Guang was fully focused. He carefully controlled the formation, expanding the gap little by little. The gap of 30 feet gradually became 40 feet, 50 feet, until it reached 80 feet, and then 100 feet. At this point, Hu Guang no longer dared to expand the gap. Usually, with the formation jade ring in his hand, he could open the gap however he wanted and make it as big as he wanted. However, the situation was different now. The entire purple jade island was filled with terrifying energy that was so dense that it was almost tangible. The power of the protective formation was also pushed to the limit. In such a state, any change to the formation could cause unpredictable consequences. 100 feet was the limit. It could not be expanded any further. Otherwise, even with the formation jade ring in his hand, it would be difficult to control. What alarmed Hu Guang the most was that he could clearly feel that the protective formation was showing signs of instability. Therefore, not only did he not dare to expand the gap, but he also had to suppress the expansion of the gap. This was undoubtedly a great test for him. Fortunately, after his efforts, the situation on the island finally reached a kind of balance, but the pressure was still great. He could only hope that this sudden change would not last too long. Otherwise, he would be frozen and unable to move. Lionheart and Bao Yuyu stood to the side. Although they were anxious, there was nothing they could do to help. 250 miles away, the talent tree clone used its full strength to quietly observe the situation on Purple Jade Island. Seeing that the gap of about 10 feet was no longer expanding, it immediately understood that its plan was about to succeed. However, looking at the current situation, if it really wanted to succeed, it would have to add fuel to the fire on Zixian's side. He took out a sound talisman and sent a message. Immediately after, the talent tree clone turned into a stream of light and pounced toward Zixian. His actions attracted the attention of countless cultivators. They could not help but widen their eyes, waiting for the show to begin. Inside Purple Jade Island, at the gap in the formation, Hu Guang also saw Lu Ye's actions. At this time, the other party was pouncing towards them, obviously harboring evil intentions. It could even be said that he saw Zixian's predicament and wanted to add insult to injury. He could not help but shout, "Senior brother!" Lionheart was furious. "Despicable thief, I'll fight him." As soon as he finished speaking, a tall and sturdy figure had already rushed out of the gap, heading straight for Lu Yi. Lionheart's eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Demonic chi surged around his body. Before he even reached Lu Yi, he had already launched a punch from afar. The violent demonic essence shattered the void, and this punch turned into a huge fist shadow, pushing towards Lu Yi. The clone dodged nimbly. Although it avoided a direct hit, the aftershock of the punch still caused the clone to lose its balance. With just this attack, Lu Yi knew that Lionheart was stronger than any of the Yu Yao he had encountered before. As expected of a powerhouse who was only one step away from becoming a Rizhao. If not for this accident, this guy would probably have become a Rizhao long ago. Lionheart's angry roar resounded throughout the 10,000 Elephant Sea. "Lu Yi, today is the day you die." The clone dodged a few attacks, but as the distance between them continued to shrink, it could no longer dodge. The main reason was that the opponent's attacks covered too wide a range, making it difficult to dodge. Suddenly, blood-red light blossomed, and a sea of blood spread out. The talent tree clone had already disappeared. Lionheart's ferocious fist slammed into the sea of blood, causing it to churn. Lionheart could not help but be taken aback by this sudden turn of events. According to the information he had gathered, Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was a weapon cultivator, so it was rather unexpected for him to suddenly display such a profound blood Dao secret technique. The vast sea of blood concealed Lu Ye's figure. For a moment, Lionheart couldn't detect Lu Ye's exact location. He frowned, then dove into the sea of blood. It had to be said that Lionheart was indeed a daring person. If it were any other cultivator facing this sea of blood, they wouldn't recklessly take the risk. Even more so, they wouldn't take the initiative to throw themselves into it, because doing so would mean surrendering the initiative of the battle. However, Lionheart didn't hesitate in the slightest. The fact that he could make such a choice undoubtedly showed his great confidence in his own strength. Lionheart was indeed strong. As he threw himself into the sea of blood, the vast sea of blood suddenly became restless and distorted. The cultivators watching from afar gasped in amazement. Although they couldn't see the specific battle scene because of the sea of blood's concealment, they could infer from the changes in the sea that Lionheart had the upper hand. Purple Jade Island's great island lord was indeed extraordinary. After less than 10 breaths of time, the vast sea of blood suddenly collapsed, revealing two figures within. Lionheart's aura was deranged, his fluffy hair exploding. He wasn't angry, but he was imposing. On the other hand, Lu Ye's figure staggered, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Even his chest had caved in, revealing a fist print. Victory and defeat had been decided. The surrounding cultivators couldn't help but reveal looks of disappointment. The powerhouse known as the number one under the sun had recently risen to fame, and this was it? This was undoubtedly not in line with everyone's expectations of Lu Yi. They had thought that this would be a fierce battle, but they hadn't expected it to be a one-sided battle. They were shocked. Just how strong was Lionheart? Yuan Che had been killed by Lu Yi with a single slash, but now he only needed 10 breaths of time to break through Lu Ye's sea of blood and seriously injure him. In comparison, Lionheart's strength was simply unimaginable. Die! After breaking free from the sea of blood, Lionheart stretched out his hand and directly grabbed at Lu Ye's head. Although his figure seemed to be motionless, his huge and burly figure strangely appeared not far from Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly retreated, raising his hand and sending countless streams of light towards Lionheart. Lionheart dodged and blocked, unharmed. When he looked up, he saw that Lu Yi had already turned around and fled, seemingly in a sorry state. A clown dares to act wildly in my Purple Jade Island. Lionheart coldly snorted and chased after him without hesitation, not caring that several streams of light had broken through his blockade and rushed towards Purple Jade Island. Chapter 1859. Senior Martial Brother, Don't Chase. Hu Guang, who was trying his best to suppress Lionheart at the gap in the formation, couldn't help but be startled when he saw Lionheart chasing after Lu Yi. The surrounding cultivators were disappointed by Lu Ye's performance, but Hu Guang felt that something wasn't right. He had personally witnessed Lu Ye's strength. Although Lionheart was strong, he shouldn't have been able to make Lu Yi suffer so much in such a short time. Coupled with the fact that Lu Yi had used his doppelgangers several times before, Hu Guang vaguely felt that the Lu Yi that appeared this time might not be his true body, but rather a doppelganger. Thus, there must be a trap. The opponent's goal should be to lure Lionheart away. Although Hu Guang saw through this and warned him, Lionheart was currently filled with fighting spirit and was confident that he could kill the enemy in front of him. He simply ignored him and chased after Lu Yi. When Hu Guang saw this, he was both angry and anxious, and his heart inexplicably filled with anger. The Yao clan's weakness of being easily swayed by emotions was an unsolvable problem. Even someone as strong as Lionheart couldn't avoid it. He hurriedly said, "Junior Martial Sister Bao, be alert." If his guess was correct and the Lu Yi that appeared just now was only a doppelganger, then after luring Lionheart away, Lu Ye's true body would definitely appear. The question now was, where was Lu Ye's true body hiding? He should be nearby, most likely among the spectating cultivators. Perhaps he used a concealment technique to quietly approach. Hu Guang looked around, and Junior Martial Sister Bao also looked around, but she couldn't find him. Instead, there were a few rays of light from Imperial tools flying in their direction. These were Imperial tools that Lu Yi had used during his fight with Lionheart. Hu Guang glanced at them and didn't take them to heart. This kind of Imperial tool wouldn't be able to do much damage, and he even found it laughable. Lu Yi was already in the Yu Yao realm, but he still used Imperial tools in battle. This was a method that only cultivators of the lower 4 realms would use in a fight. There were several Imperial tools, and one of them flew straight towards the gap. Junior Martial Sister Bao flashed out and blocked Hu Guang's path, reaching out to grab the Imperial tool. At that moment, a strange change occurred. The magic power on the ordinary Imperial tool suddenly changed, and then suddenly became violent. A figure appeared there like a ghost. Junior Sister Bao's hand had already reached out. Her hand, which was originally grabbing the Imperial equipment, seemed to be grabbing at the figure that had suddenly appeared. Hu Guang, who was looking around for Lu Yi, suddenly turned his head and stared at the figure that had inexplicably appeared out of nowhere. He saw a face that made him feel both fear and resentment. It was none other than the Lu Yi he had been looking for. Their eyes met, and Hu Guang could only see boundless indifference. "Be careful!" Hu Guang shouted. Junior Martial Sister Bao also realized that something was wrong. Her reaction was extremely fast. Almost at the same time that Lu Ye's main body appeared, her demon chi fiercely surged. Her sharp fingernails shot out like sharp weapons and clawed at Lu Ye's chest. Even Lu Yi couldn't react in time to such a sudden attack. He had teleported directly from the bottom of the Wanxiang Sea, so while catching his opponent off guard, he also needed some time to react. Junior Martial Sister Bao's fingernails pierced through his protective magic power and into his flesh. Junior Martial Sister Bao's face lit up. She had succeeded. However, her expression soon collapsed because after her fingernails pierced 2 inches into Lu Ye's flesh, they couldn't go any further. Her wrist was suddenly grabbed tightly by Lu Ye's hand. Junior Martial Sister Bao fiercely exerted her demon chi, but she couldn't break free. She couldn't help but be shocked. Her opponent's physical strength was so strong. In terms of physical strength alone, humans were basically no match for demons. Only physique cultivators who focused on cultivating their physique had the ability to compete with demon cultivators. Weapon cultivators definitely didn't have this qualification. However, the fact was that a weapon cultivator of the human race had actually locked her wrist like a shackle, making her unable to move at all. Junior Martial Sister Bao had only experienced this kind of pure strength suppression from Lionheart. Even Hu Guang couldn't suppress her in this aspect. The sound of the long saber being unsheathed was extremely loud, like the cry of a phoenix. When the saber light flashed past, Junior Martial Sister Bao let out a muffled groan and staggered back. One of her arms had already disappeared, and blood flowed out like a waterfall from the broken arm. In fact, if she hadn't reacted quickly enough and shifted her body the moment Lu Yi attacked, the saber wouldn't have simply cut off her arm. At the same time that Junior Martial Sister Bao retreated, Lu Ye's gaze locked onto Hu Guang. Exerting force, the broken arm in his hand turned into a bloody mist. His figure leapt into the purple jade formation through the gap in the formation, and the mountain coiling saber slashed down at Hu Guang. Wherever the saber passed, small cracks appeared in the void. Hu Guang's heart was filled with bitterness. In the face of such a terrifying attack, if he didn't dodge, he would be doomed. However, if he dodged, the purple jade formation would be in danger. There was no other choice. If he was killed by Lu Yi here, the formation would also collapse, so Hu Guang didn't hesitate and retreated the moment the saber fell. The saber missed, but Lu Yi had already expected it. His figure was like a shadow, and his saber was like a wheel, enveloping Hu Guang under his saber aura. A figure pounced over from the side, and in a swift movement, it turned into an afterimage in Lu Ye's peripheral vision. It was Junior Martial Sister Bao, who had lost an arm. This demoness was extremely tenacious. Not only did she not make a sound after losing an arm, but she also quickly counterattacked. At this moment, all his thoughts were on Hu Guang, wanting to kill him quickly. Facing Bao Yu's pounce, he had no time to dodge. In a hurry, he could only construct a defensive spirit rune to protect himself. When the huge force hit him, Lu Yi felt as if he had been hit by a mountain. His body flew to the side uncontrollably. The defensive spirit rune he constructed in a hurry shattered at the same time, and even his protective magic power was scattered by the collision. Suddenly, there were bursts of exclamations in the distance. The onlooking cultivators had seen Lionheart chase Lu Yi away with their own eyes. They were extremely disappointed with Lu Ye's performance, but they didn't expect a series of unforeseen events to occur on the Purple Jade Island. First, Lu Yi, who should have been pursued by Lionheart, appeared out of nowhere and broke into the Purple Jade Formation through the gap in the formation. He chopped off Bao Yuyu's arm and then slashed at Hu Guang. Bao Yuyu took the opportunity to pounce to the side and knocked Lu Yi away. This unforeseen event that happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint was too much for everyone's eyes to take in, causing their emotions to fluctuate wildly. Then, an even bigger change occurred. As Lu Ye's figure flew out, the gap that was only 10 feet wide suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it grew to 20 feet, 50 feet, 1,000 feet. The glowing hemispherical body of Purple Jade Island seemed to have been torn apart by an invisible force from one end to the other. A crisp sound came from the depths of every cultivator's heart. Bright light danced in the sky, as if countless fireflies had gathered and sprinkled down. At the same time, buzzing sounds came from various important places inside the Purple Jade Island. Those were the positions of the formation bases. The violent changes caused the entire spiritual island to shake. The spectacular energy rain made every cultivator dazed because no one had ever seen such a scene with their own eyes. The light gradually dimmed, and after a brief moment of brilliance, the entire Purple Jade Island appeared in the cultivator's vision, making everyone realize something terrifying. The protective formation of the top-grade spiritual island, Purple Jade Island, which had been maintained for tens of thousands of years, was broken. There was an uproar. How many years had it been since the protective formation of a top-grade spiritual island was broken? No one had expected that they would be able to witness such a historic scene with their own eyes when they were just here to watch the fun. Of course, a broken protective formation could be rearranged, but the accumulation of tens of thousands of years could not be recovered. How could a rearranged protective formation compare to the one before? On Purple Jade Island, thousands of demon cultivators were dazed. Even Hu Guang and Bao Yuyu were so heartbroken that they could not breathe. The accumulation of generations of Purple Jade Island demon cultivators and the efforts of countless ancestors had been buried in their generation. Because of this, they were the sinners of the Purple Jade Island. They did not have time to grieve because an incomparably sharp killing intent had already enveloped them. The two Yu Yao demons hurriedly looked to the side and saw that Lu Yi, whom Bao Yuyu had pounced on, was already charging towards them with his saber. "Stop him together!" Hu Guang shouted angrily. Although he had seen Lu Ye's strength and was wary of him, at this moment, the enemy had already invaded his own spiritual island. Hu Guang had no reason to retreat. He and Bao Yuyu joined forces. 2 against 1, no matter how strong Lu Yi was, they could hold him back for a while. Lionheart must have seen the changes here and must be on his way back. The protective formation could not be recovered, but Lu Yi must die here. Hu Guang was sure that this Lu Yi before him was the original body and not a clone. Bao Yuyu still did not make a sound. Blood was no longer flowing from her severed arm. For a late-stage Yu Yao like her, although the injury was serious, as long as she survived this ordeal, she could still regrow it. The two Yu Yao demons charged towards Lu Yi, one on the left and one on the right. Many years of interaction had given them a tacit understanding of each other. The six-tailed demon fox's shadow appeared behind Hu Guang. Its furry tail swayed incessantly, and its eyes became eerie. There was a mysterious surge of spiritual energy. Everything in its path began to distort. It had activated the six-tailed demon fox's secret technique. This secret technique could create extremely realistic illusions that could even affect the real environment. If one's spiritual energy was not as strong as the opponent's, they would not even know how they died. Lu Yi! Hu Guang shouted angrily. He wanted to attract Lu Ye's attention so that he could unleash the full power of his secret technique. Living up to his expectations, Lu Yi turned to look at him. The moment their eyes met, Hu Guang was stunned for a moment because he suddenly discovered that Lu Ye's eyes had turned blood red, and there were extremely complex and profound lines quickly forming in those blood-red eyes. In the blink of an eye, those eyes had turned into extremely strange pupils. Then the entire world turned dark red, as if blood was flowing everywhere. Lu Ye's figure disappeared inexplicably. Only the 2 blood moons shone in the sky. The blood-red light spread out in all directions, bringing boundless deterrence and fear. Hu Guang's vision was filled with illusions. End of chapter. Chapter 1860. Hu Guang turned pale with fright. The secret technique of the six-tailed fox clan was an extremely exquisite illusion technique. As an expert in illusion techniques himself, he immediately realized what was going on. Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was also proficient in illusion techniques and was even stronger than him. Hu Guang's heart was filled with bitterness. He had never expected such a ridiculous thing to happen. How could a mere human race weapon cultivator cultivate such a profound and exquisite illusion technique? It was laughable that he had wanted to attract Lu Ye's attention just now so that he could unleash the full power of his secret technique. Little did he know that this was exactly what Lu Yi wanted. Furthermore, if it weren't for the fact that he was also activating a secret technique, he wouldn't have been so severely affected, even if his opponent was extremely proficient in this field. He was a late-stage moonjade cultivator with an extremely powerful soul, so how could he be so vulnerable? Hu Guang was right. If Lu Yi had simply used the Blood Eye Spirit Rune to target him, he might have been affected, but it would not have had such a terrifying effect. However, both of them were activating secret techniques of the same type. This was equivalent to the two of them wrestling in this domain. Lu Ye's Blood Eye Spirit Rune was, after all, an inheritance from the Blood Ancestor. How could the Six-Tailed Fox clan's secret technique compare to it? As a result, Hu Guang was not only affected by the Blood Eye Spirit Rune, but also suffered from the backlash of his secret technique being broken. With both of these things happening at the same time, Hu Guang's situation became extremely bad. In Bao Yuyu's field of vision, after Hu Guang let out a fierce roar, he stood stiffly on the spot, staring blankly at Lu Yi. On the other hand, Lu Yi raised her long saber high, magic power surging from the blade as she prepared to slash down. If this saber slashed down, Hu Guang would be doomed. Bao Yuyu's eyes were filled with anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Her figure, which was originally rushing towards Lu Yi, suddenly turned and rushed towards Hu Guang. With a roar, she suddenly revealed her monster race true body. It was a lithe and slender leopard covered in tattooed patterns. Its left forelimb was missing because of the battle just now. She opened her mouth, and a ball of dazzling light appeared in her mouth. She was about to spit it out at Lu Yi. That was the monster core that she had cultivated for thousands of years. It was also a life-or-death technique. Under normal circumstances, the monster race would not use their monster cores to fight unless they had no other choice. That was because the risk was too great. Once the monster core was damaged, it would damage their foundation. If the monster core was destroyed, the result would be even worse. Needless to say, Bao Yuyu reacted quickly, and this was the only way she could save Hu Guang. He spat out the monster core and compressed the violent energy within it to meet the incoming saber. The moment they collided, Lu Ye's expression froze. An enormous pressure came from the front, and the terrifying power made it impossible for his blade to cut down quickly. It even showed signs of being pushed back. As expected of the monster race's life-or-death technique, it really couldn't be underestimated. Wah! Bao Yuyu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. She had used her monster core to meet the mountain coiling saber. The moment they collided, her monster core was damaged, and the damage was directly reflected back to her body. She was extremely shocked. Her opponent's saber, how sharp was it? It actually broke through the dense monster core that had condensed around her monster core and left a hole in it. How could she have known that Lu Ye's mountain coiling saber was transformed from a powerful soldier race member? After he became a Yu Yao, the mountain coiling saber had also undergone a transformation. It was originally incomparably sharp, and with the addition of the divine edge spirit marks added to it, it could be said that if Bao Yuyu's monster core wasn't tough enough, the saber would have cut through it. At this moment, the most appropriate response was undoubtedly to use her monster core to dodge the mountain coiling saber. However, she couldn't do that because she was behind her monster core, and Hu Guang was behind her. If she really dodged with the mountain coiling saber's sharpness, the two of them would die together. Not only couldn't she do that, but she also had to use her monster core with all her might. Fortunately, the feedback she received from her monster core told her that she had the upper hand in this exchange. Lu Yi seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. However, in the next moment, the momentum of Lu Ye's saber suddenly changed. The power of his saber layered over each other like waves. Myriad tidal waves. This was a reward from the Constellation Hall. It had helped Lu Yi a lot when he was in the Constellation Hall. It allowed him to barely resist Yu Yao's magic power with his spiritual power. However, as Lu Ye's cultivation grew, he rarely used it. However, there was no such thing as a useless secret technique in this world. It all depended on whether the timing was right. In the face of such a violent monster core, this secret technique was undoubtedly effective. The pressure from the saber rapidly weakened. Lu Yi spun his saber, and the resplendent monster core was sent flying. Bao Yuyu's face turned pale. She could only watch as the saber slashed down at her. She no longer had the strength to resist. In her haste, she could only raise her right forelimb to block above her head. At the same time, her long leopard tail whipped out. When the mountain saber fell, the huge leopard's body stiffened. Then her right forelimb fell, and her entire body was split in half. Another round of exclamations came from the cultivators watching the battle from afar. Everything seemed complicated, but from the moment Hu Guang shouted Lu Ye's name, to the moment Bao Yuyu rushed forward to block him, spitting out her monster core and risking her life to attack Lu Yi, only 2 breaths of time had passed. In just 2 breaths of time, Yu Yao, a powerful monster core cultivator, was killed in front of everyone. Everyone could only see Lu Ye's carefree expression. They couldn't help but be shocked by his terrifying strength. They finally understood the weight of being the strongest cultivator under the sun. Bao Yuyu's body split open. Blood burst out like a blooming flower, revealing Hu Guang behind her. It was only now that Hu Guang's eyes gradually regained a trace of clarity. Fortunately, Bao Yuyu had used her tail to strike him before she died. The strength of that strike was extremely ingenious. It not only helped Hu Guang escape from the illusion, but it also didn't injure him in the slightest. Bao Yuyu had even sent Hu Guang several hundred meters away. The moment he regained his vision, Hu Guang saw a scene that made his eyes pop out of their sockets. The huge leopard's body was split open, blood and organs spilling out. Hu Guang couldn't help but fall into a daze. He muttered, "Junior Sister Bao?" As his voice fell, a thick murderous intent began to descend, as well as Lu Ye's figure that was several thousand feet away, rushing towards them. Although Hu Guang didn't know exactly what had happened, he knew that Bao Yuyu had died for him. His heart was filled with grief, but he forced himself to suppress it, because from the brief exchange just now, he knew one thing: he was definitely not a match for Lu Yi. So, when he saw Lu Yi coming for him, he didn't even think about it. He turned around and fled. He could already see Lionheart's figure rapidly approaching from afar, so as long as he could hold on for 10 breaths, he had a chance to survive. In the middle of a great battle, it was extremely unwise to leave one's back to the enemy, but Hu Guang had no other choice at this moment. Seeing Hu Guang begin to flee, Lu Ye's eyes flashed and his spiritual energy surged. Using this as a foundation, he quickly drew the outline of the Divine Edge Divine Rune. The spirit runes he obtained from the talent tree in his early years could only be drawn with spirit energy. They were the most orthodox spirit runes. But after the transformation of the talent tree, these spirit runes were no longer limited to one method of display. Take the Divine Edge Divine Rune for example. If Lu Yi drew it with his spirit energy, it would become a spirit rune, but if he drew it with his soul force, it would become a divine rune. When fighting with an enemy, Lu Yi rarely used divine runes because no matter what kind of enemy they were facing, their soul defense was extremely important. Even if they didn't cultivate a defensive soul secret technique, they would still have a soul treasure to protect their spirit sea. Rashly urging soul force to draw divine runes was a thankless task and would even affect one's performance. Only when a cultivator reached the sunshine level and had a qualitative leap in their soul force would they frequently urge their soul force in a fight. Under normal circumstances, even if Lu Yi used divine runes to deal with Hu Guang, the effect wouldn't be too good. Hu Guang was from the six-tailed demon fox clan. His soul force was definitely not weak. But just now, his secret technique was broken and he had already suffered a considerable backlash. At this moment, his soul force was most likely unstable and his soul force defense would definitely be riddled with holes. This was a weakness that Lu Yi could target. The formless spiritual energy took shape and transformed into an invisible arrow that shot towards Hu Guang. There were some reckless demon clan constellations blocking the way, but Lu Yi casually killed them. In front of him, Hu Guang grunted, but his speed didn't decrease at all. Seeing this, Lu Yi didn't hold back and continued to draw divine edge divine runes, attacking forward like a tide. Hu Guang's soul force defense really couldn't block such an attack. After Lu Yi activated nearly 20 divine edge divine runes in a row, Hu Guang suddenly screamed and fell to the ground. Lu Yi quickly crossed the distance of several hundred feet and stepped on Hu Guang's back. In his perception, Hu Guang's aura had become extremely weak. His entire body was drenched in sweat and trembling uncontrollably. This was undoubtedly a sign that his soul force had suffered extremely serious injuries. At this moment, even his consciousness was probably blurred. Otherwise, he would still have the strength to fight and wouldn't have been trampled by Lu Yi like this. This was the time to kill a thief. Lu Yi raised his long saber and was about to slash down. "Stop!" An angry roar came from afar. It was Lionheart, who had hurriedly rushed back. In fact, when Lionheart was rushing back, the Talent Tree Avatar had tried to stop him, but without the Blade Gourd, the Talent Tree Avatar could only use limited methods. Moreover, Lu Ye's main body was fighting with all his strength and lacked control over the Talent Tree Avatar, so he couldn't stop Lionheart. Lionheart had seen the scene of Bao Yuyu's tragic death from afar, and his heart was bleeding, but he was powerless to stop it. Now that Hu Guang was about to die, he could no longer hold back. Unfortunately, he had just been lured out and would need some time to rush back. Lu Yi tilted his head and saw Lionheart's enraged expression from afar. He bent down and reached out, grabbing the unconscious Hu Guang by the hair and lifting him up. Then he kicked Hu Guang's calf, forcing him to kneel with his back facing Lu Yi and facing Lionheart. Lu Yi stood behind Hu Guang, the mountain saber in his hand held horizontally to Hu Guang's neck. End of chapter. Chapter 1861. Purple Jade Island's second island master, Hu Guang, seemed to have lost his mind. He was forced to his knees by an outsider cultivator, but he didn't resist at all. Lionheart, who was hurrying back, saw this from afar. His eyes immediately turned red, and he gnashed his teeth. "You dare!" He couldn't afford to die again. Ignoring the hundreds of constellations that had been killed in the Yuyao realm, first Junior Brother Tiger, then Red Elephant, then Ape Che, Junior Brother Chai, Junior Brother Lang, and now Bao Yuyu. In less than half a month, 6 Yuyao had died. If Hu Guang died as well, that would be 7. When that happened, Zi Xian would be the only one left on the Yuyao realm. No matter what, he couldn't allow Hu Guang to be killed, especially right under his nose. As he roared, his body glowed with red light, and his qi and blood surged. He'd clearly activated a secret technique to increase his speed. He wanted to save Hu Guang before Lu Yi could. However, this seemingly short distance was actually an uncrossable heavenly tribulation. On the other side, Hu Guang, who was kneeling in front of Lu Yi, suddenly regained a sliver of clarity when the coiling mountain saber's icy blade touched him. But that was all. His spirit sea was in turmoil, and his soul was in tatters. Even if his body wasn't damaged, he was powerless to fight. He could vaguely sense that his death was near, and he couldn't help but recall the familiar faces of the dead. How could this be? When had this happened? As he struggled to think, he suddenly remembered that all of this had started after that banquet. Their island had been targeting 3 World Island for a year. When Lu Yi appeared and lured him over, First Island Master Lionheart swallowed a cultivator from 3 World Island named Wei Pa right in front of him. Before taking action, Zi Xian knew that 3 World Island wouldn't yield. Once conflict erupted, they would definitely fight back. But no one had expected their counterattack to come so quickly, so fiercely, and so terrifyingly fast. After Wei Pa was swallowed alive, Lu Yi immediately launched an attack and killed Junior Brother Tiger. After Junior Brother Tiger was killed, Junior Brother Red Elephant was ambushed and killed on the island. In the late Yuyao period, they'd led 4,000 soldiers to attack 3 World Island, but Ape Che had died along the way, and several hundred constellations had been killed as well. They'd had no choice but to retreat. Today, even Junior's sister Bao had died, and he probably wouldn't be able to survive either. All of this was done by a single person. It could be said that he single-handedly turned Purple Jade Island upside down. What kind of terrifying ability was that? Frightening and laughable. Despite being a top-notch spiritual island, it had been utterly defeated by a single person. Hu Guang suddenly felt regret. He shouldn't have provoked the three-world island. If he hadn't, then there wouldn't have been so many tragedies, and so many Purple Jade demon cultivators wouldn't have died. However, the most useless thing in this world was regret. Before Zi Xian made her move, she had never placed the three-world island in her eyes. Whether it was her dead junior brother Hu, junior sister Bao, or Red Elephant and the others, all of them felt that dealing with the three-world island was a piece of cake. He was about to die, and he could only rely on First Island Master Lionheart to avenge them. He didn't know. He wasn't even sure if the invincible Lionheart was a match for Lu Yi. His heart was filled with regret, but he was powerless to achieve it. A debt of blood. A cold shout came from behind him. As his transcendence energy was activated, it spread all around. Blood for blood. A sudden pain came from his neck. Hu Guang realized that he was suddenly lifted up. His vision suddenly increased, but strangely he couldn't feel the existence of his own body. He blinked and suddenly realized that he had been beheaded. Yes, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. This was what the Purple Jade Island's demon cultivators had shouted at the banquet that day. However, to the Purple Jade Island's demon cultivators, this was just a pretense to deal with the three-world island. However, they really did it. Wei Po's death was exchanged for the lives of 7 Yu Yao and hundreds of star mansions. And this wasn't the end. Lionheart, who was rushing toward Zi Xian, watched as the kneeling Hu Guang was beheaded by Lu Yi. Blood gushed out from the headless neck like a fountain, and the anxiety and worry in his heart turned into boundless anger at this moment. The corners of his eyes burst open, and blood flowed down his cheeks, making him look terrifying. Suddenly, he let out a roar, and a sound wave visible to the naked eye converged into a beam and attacked Lu Yi from nearly 1,000 li away. "I'll give it to you." Lu Yi kicked out, sending Hu Guang's head flying towards Lionheart. He turned around and rushed towards the interior of Purple Jade Island. Along the way, he killed a group of demon cultivators who were rushing towards him and fearlessly wanted to save Hu Guang. In a flash, he rushed into a large hall and disappeared without a trace. Not long after the head flew out, it exploded into dust under Lionheart's sound wave attack. This made Lionheart even more furious. The countless cultivators watching from afar were silent. They were shocked by the terrifying and shocking scene that had just happened. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that a mid-Yue Yao cultivator could kill 2 late Yue Yao cultivators in such a short time. Because they were too far away, they could clearly see Bao Yuyu's death. It was because Bao Yuyu's strength was insufficient in a real battle. However, they couldn't understand Hu Guang's death. After Bao Yuyu's death, Hu Guang was captured alive by Lu Yi before he could do anything. He was forced to kneel on the ground and beheaded in front of Lionheart. This tragic scene made the hearts of all the cultivators who saw it tremble. "Ha!" An old man suddenly sighed. "Killing people is just a matter of time. This three-world island's Lu Yi is a bit too much." From the perspective of an outsider, Lu Yi's method of killing Hu Guang was clearly a humiliation. Many cultivators walked on the edge of life and death all year round. They had experienced countless battles in their lives, and their hearts were tough and tenacious. They didn't fear death, but if they had to die, who wouldn't want to die a quick death? With so many people watching, Hu Guang was humiliated like this before he died, and his head was even kicked like a ball. It was very uncomfortable. Too much. A cold snort sounded. "Old thing, what nonsense are you spouting?" The old man who spoke was a Yu Yao. When he heard this, he was enraged. He turned to look in the direction of the voice, and saw a large man with distinct features. The corners of his eyes twitched. "So it's fellow Taoist Bai Dang, the great island master of the 5-color island." In terms of status, he was equal to Lionheart. Although he hadn't been in the 10,000 Elephant Sea for many years, who didn't know him? Although the old man came from a powerful force, it was still much weaker than the 5-color domain. Moreover, Bai Dang's cultivation was stronger than his. It was normal for Bai Dang to reprimand him when he saw that he was displeased. The old man immediately decided to swallow his anger. However, Bai Dang didn't let him off easily. He looked at him coldly and said, "Don't try to persuade others to do good without experiencing their suffering. Old thing, how much do you know about the grudge between Zixian and the Three-World Island? How dare you criticize me here?" Being reprimanded in such a manner, the old man's face instantly turned green and red. Even a clay figurine would get angry, let alone a Yuyao like him. He immediately said, "This old man really doesn't know about the grudge between the two great spiritual islands. If fellow Taoist knows, why don't you tell me?" Bai Dang snorted coldly and said, "Then I'll tell you. A few days ago, Zixian suddenly invited guests from all over. Coincidentally, my name was on the guest list. I had nothing to do, so I went to take a look. Coincidentally, I ran into the source of the grudge between Zixian and the Three-World Island." He immediately recounted what happened that day. When they heard that the Three-World Island's Yuyao cultivator, Wei Pe, had killed a few purple jade constellations for no reason when he passed by Purple Jade Island, everyone revealed subtle expressions. Purple Jade Island was famous. Any cultivator who had spent some time on the 10,000 Elephant Sea would have heard of it. Who would be so blind as to kill a cultivator from such a powerful spiritual island, especially one so close to Zixian, unless that Three-World Island cultivator called Wei Pe had lost his mind? Therefore, when they heard this, everyone knew that Zixian was definitely trying to frame him. When they heard that Zixian had offered 1 billion spirit jades, Lu Yi agreed without hesitation to save Wei Pe's life. He quickly gathered 1 billion spirit jades. In the end, that Hu Guang went back on his word after he left the island. Going back on one's word and going back on one's word was not the style of a top-tier spiritual island. Then, when Lionheart devoured Wei Pe, everyone revealed looks of disgust. Many people knew that the demon clan had a tradition of blood sacrifice. However, using a living Yuyao cultivator as a sacrifice still made them frown. Although many cultivators came from different clans, if the demon clan could capture a human as a sacrifice today, they could capture their clansmen as sacrifices in the future. Bai Dang's eloquence was not very good, so his description was not very vivid. However, through his narration, the events of that day's banquet were clearly displayed before the eyes of many cultivators. Only then did the spectating cultivators understand the origin of the feud between the two spiritual islands. Moreover, from the sound of it, it was clear that Zixian was targeting Three-World Island. As for the reason, Three-World Island was flourishing with each passing day. Many people were envious of it. It was not strange that Zixian would target them. Zixian went back on her word and embezzled 1 billion spirit jades from Three-World Island. Lionheart also devoured a cultivator from Three-World Island. Lu Ye's actions today are merely retaliation. Does this still count? Bai Dang looked at the old man from before. The old man remained silent. If he were in Lu Ye's shoes, if he had the same ability as Lu Yi and encountered the same situation, he wouldn't have done any worse than Lu Yi. Cultivators were mostly quick to settle grudges. Who would hold back when they were wronged? This old man has misspoken. The old man was also a carefree person. Although he could see that Bai Dang had the intention of speaking up for Lu Yi, he knew that the great island master of Five-Color Island seemed to have a personal relationship with Lu Yi. When Three-World Island's development was in trouble, Five-Color Island was the first to stand up and support it. Opening a branch of the Five-Color Chamber of Commerce on Three-World Island was the best evidence. But it had to be said that Bai and was right about one thing. Don't try to persuade others to do good without experiencing their pain. The grudges between cultivators were difficult for outsiders to see clearly unless they were involved. Perhaps the one who was being bullied was the one who started the trouble, just like the current Purple Jade Island. End of chapter. Chapter 1862. Since the old man apologized, Tao Qing naturally wouldn't be so unforgiving. He simply nodded. Someone else said, "But then again, what's the origin of the Three-World Island? They're so powerful. Back then, the Battle of Baiyue shocked the Wanxiang Sea. Now, they even have the upper hand against Zixuan." Everyone called the Three-World Island the Three-World Island. However, no one knew which galaxy the cultivators of the three-world island came from. A cultivator looked at Tao Cheng. Daoist Tao Cheng, you seem to be quite familiar with the three-world island. Do you know anything? Tao Cheng placed his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Why do you care about their origin? Just remember one thing. The cultivators of the three-world island aren't unreasonable. Although they haven't been in the Wanxiang Sea for long, they've never taken the initiative to have any conflicts with any forces. For example, when they attacked Baiyue, it was because Baiyue was ordered by someone to attack the cultivators of the three-world island in private. That's why the three-world island attacked Baiyue. Therefore, whether it's back then or today, the way the three-world island does things is that they won't attack unless they're attacked first." At this point, Tao Cheng changed the topic and chuckled. It said that there's a female demon from the six-tailed fox clan in Zixuan. She's so beautiful that she can make people fall head over heels for her. Whose concubine is she now? No one dared to answer. Some things were clear in their hearts, but it wasn't good to say it out loud. Back then, who was the one who secretly ordered by you to secretly attack the cultivators of the three-world island? Perhaps no one knew at first, but when Lu Yi was chasing after Yu Huan, there was actually Ri Zhao who came to uphold justice. This was very ridiculous. As for the female demon from the six-tailed fox clan, she seemed to be directly related to Guardian Ri Zhao. Baiyue first, then Zixuan. When all these pieces of information were connected, it was undoubtedly very thought-provoking. A cultivator changed the topic. In Daoist Tao Cheng's opinion, how will today's battle develop? Tao Cheng sneered, "I'm not in the battle. I'm just watching like everyone else. How would I know how the battle will develop? I'll just watch." Although he said that, he looked in the direction of Zixuan Island with some worry. Lionheart had already killed his way back. After Lu Yi killed Hu Guang, he flashed and hid in a large hall on Purple Jade Island. No one knew what he was doing. One had to admit that the strength displayed by Lu Yi was very strong, but the Purple Jade Island's monster cultivators were not afraid of death. Everything happened so quickly that most of the monster cultivators on Purple Jade Island did not have time to react. Now that they did, they all rushed towards Lu Yi. Xing Su was indeed weaker than Yu Yao, but if Lu Yi didn't escape as soon as possible, he wouldn't be able to do much on his own. No matter how strong he was, could he single-handedly exterminate all the Yao cultivators on Purple Jade Island? If he were Lu Yi, he would have definitely fled before Lionheart arrived. He had reaped a great harvest from this battle, and to Lu Yi, he had profited immensely. He had made a name for the three-world island, and there was no need for him to take such a risk. He believed that from now on, no one would dare to provoke the three-world island. But Lu Yi refused to leave. At the same time, Lu Yi charged into the hall and swiftly killed a few constellation demon clans. Then, with a flip of his palm, a deep-sea snail appeared in his hand. He didn't hesitate and immediately put the snail to his mouth and blew it. Chang Sheng thought he was alone, but in reality he was never alone. He had the entire three-world island behind him. It was just that the time hadn't come yet, so three-world island's monster cultivators hadn't made a move. Now, the time had come. Purple Jade Island's great protective array had collapsed. The battle against Baiyu could not be replayed in Zixian because the protective array of Zixian was too strong. Even though Lu Yi had disguised himself as Ho Fei with the precious blood clone to sneak in, he had only killed Red Elephant and had not brought anyone with him in the Small Flower realm. Even if he had, he wouldn't have been able to break the great protective array in a short time. The only result would have been being caught like a turtle in a jar. There was no need to worry about that now. At this time, in the Three-World Islands Monster Cultivators encampment area, all the Three-World Islands Monster Cultivators who had received Lu Ye's message in advance had gathered here. Lu Ye had left a mark on this location with the blue sea snail in advance. Recently, he had been targeting Purple Jade Island, so he had naturally prepared some things in advance. The door opened by the blue sea snail didn't lead to the merfolk's territory. He had tried this in his early years after obtaining the blue sea snail. As long as he left a specific mark on a certain location in advance, the door would appear at the mark after blowing the blue sea snail. This mark could be actively removed. If it wasn't removed, it would remain for a period of time before dissipating. Lu Yi had always felt that this thing could be used as a surprise tactic in war. Unfortunately, he hadn't had a good opportunity to use it. This time, the opportunity was very good. When the door opened, Ma Shangxi was the first to rush in, followed by Luan Xiaoa, Yan Miao, and He Baichuan. It could be said that Yu Yao's combat strength on the surface of the three-world island was all gone. Then, a large number of Xing Su cultivators passed through the door in an orderly and extremely fast manner. The three-world island's monster cultivators descended on purple jade. Back when the three-world island was poor, Lu Yi had dared to lead all the cultivators to attack Baiyue, leaving the entire three-world island behind. Although the three-world island was developing well, he still had no scruples. On the three-world island side, there were no Xing Su cultivators left behind to maintain order in the trade zone. If they won this battle, they would be able to crush Purple Jade Island's might. In the future, no one would dare to cause trouble in the three-world island. If they lost, then naturally, there would be nothing left to talk about. Purple Jade Island. Lionheart's speed was very fast. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately rushed back to help. However, Lu Yi was even faster. He first killed Bao Yuyu, then Hu Guang. Lionheart was so angry that the corners of his eyes were about to burst. He finally killed his way back to Purple Jade Island. With a furious roar, he charged toward the hall that Lu Yi had entered. His killing intent was so condensed that it was almost tangible. He swore to kill Lu Yi here. Then all the cultivators in the area who were watching the battle saw an unbelievable scene. Lionheart charged fiercely into the hall, but after only one breath he was sent flying out in an extremely sorry state. His huge, burly body was like a sandbag. His body was in midair, and the qi and blood around him were showing signs of dissipating. Following closely behind Lionheart were several figures, each with a fearful aura. The person in the lead was none other than Lu Yi of the three-world island. What's going on? Cries of surprise rang out from all directions. They couldn't understand what they were seeing. Lu Yi had charged in alone, but now several people had rushed out together. Moreover, those people weren't ordinary cultivators. They were clearly Yu Yao, and they looked quite familiar. Isn't that the first island master of the three-world island, Luan Xiaoa? Some cultivators recognized Luan Xiaoa. As the first island master of the three-world island, Luan Xiaoa would often appear in public. Under Tang Jun's guidance, she had befriended Yu Yao from various factions. Naturally, many cultivators recognized her. However, what puzzled them was why Luan Xiaoa had appeared in Purple Jade, and why she had charged out from that hall. That's Ma Shangxi. Someone else recognized Ma Shangxi. And Miao Yan. That bastard He Baichuan is here too. Including Lu Yi, this meant that all 5 Yu Yao who were officially registered in the three-world island were gathered here. Aside from Lu Yi, the other 4 were all late-stage Yu Yao. Shock, disbelief, confusion, all sorts of emotions surged in the hearts of the cultivators. Soon, everyone's expressions changed. They finally understood what Lionheart had encountered. The first island master of Purple Jade had charged into the hall aggressively, but in the end, he had been ambushed by the 5 Yu Yao of the three-world island. How could he have ended up well? Lionheart was indeed powerful, but he was still a Yu Yao, not Sunshine. It was like a naughty child in the countryside digging out a snake's hole. He thought there was only one small snake in the hole, but 5 ferocious tigers suddenly appeared. How could the word tragic not be enough? However, Lionheart was truly powerful. This was evident from his current state, as there were no obvious wounds on his body. In other words, the 5 Yu Yaos of the three-world island hadn't been able to do anything to him in the exchange just now. Lionheart was retreating, and the corners of his eyes were about to explode. However, even more Purple Jade demonic cultivators were charging forward. The entire Purple Jade Island was in an uproar. Thousands of demonic cultivators came from different directions and gathered here. The huge spiritual island was filled with a feeling of unity against a common enemy. Lionheart's heart sank. The spectating cultivators couldn't figure out how the Yu Yao of the three-world island had appeared on Purple Jade Island. However, after he charged into the hall, he saw it clearly. There was a door in the middle of the hall. From the door, one figure after another appeared. Lionheart didn't even need to think to know that the door was connected to the three-world island. He couldn't figure out how Lu Yi had managed to open such a door in such a short period of time. He only knew that Purple Jade was in big trouble this time. If it was just Lu Yi alone, he wouldn't be too worried. No matter how strong a single person was, there was still a limit to what they could do. Zixian's Yu Yao had indeed died and he was the only one left. However, Zixian had 5,000 constellations. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they could still kill Lu Yi. However, if the cultivators of the three-world island attacked together, he couldn't predict how the situation would turn out. After a short consideration, Lionheart came to a decision. He immediately roared, "Destroy the hall! Destroy the door!" He couldn't allow more three-world island cultivators to descend on Purple Jade. "What are you shouting for?" Ma Shangxi shouted angrily. The sea of blood suddenly spread out, trying to envelop Lionheart. Lionheart was the backbone of Purple Jade. As long as he was killed, no matter how many Purple Jade Yao cultivators there were, they would be nothing but a pile of loose sand. However, Lionheart wasn't an ordinary Yu Yao. Although he had been caught off guard, he was still strong. Faced with Ma Shangxi's sea of blood, he quickly dodged. Before he could catch his breath, his expression turned cold. When he looked up, Lu Yi was already charging at him with his saber. End of chapter. Chapter 1863. Lionheart's expression was solemn. He didn't dare to let his guard down. He was still very wary of Lu Yi. Even if he were to attack personally, he wouldn't be able to kill Bao Yuyu and Hu Guang in such a short time. But Lu Yi had done it. Regardless of his cultivation level, his methods were extremely frightening. He was definitely an opponent worthy of Lionheart's full strength. Suddenly, a great battle broke out. The two figures flew back and forth, fist shadows and saber lights wreaking havoc. In terms of size, Lu Yi was only the size of Lionheart's arm, but in terms of momentum and strength, the tiny Lu Yi seemed to be a notch higher. Ma Shangxi also controlled the sea of blood to surge and boil at the side, constantly looking for an opportunity to envelop Lionheart. This made Lionheart extremely frustrated. Almost at the same time that Lu Yi and his servant faced off against Lionheart, a great battle broke out in the main hall where the door was. Countless demon constellations rushed over and attacked the main hall. Because Lionheart had given them the order to destroy the main hall, they didn't need to know the reason to carry out his orders. Luan Xiao, Yan Miao, and He Baichuan's three Yu Yao figures leaped forward. Everywhere they passed, blood-red light bloomed. Although the Purple Jade Demon cultivators used the twin Qi-linked branches formation disc to form a formation, even if all of them were late-stage constellations, the strength they could unleash was barely equal to that of a newly ascended Yu Yao. The three Yu Yaos of the three-world island were all late-stage cultivators, especially Luan Xiao and Yan Miao. They had the potential to break through to the Sunshine Realm. Even if the Purple Jade Demon cultivators formed a formation, how could they be a match for them? But with just the three of them, it was obvious that they couldn't protect the main hall. While they were killing the Purple Jade Demon cultivators, more Purple Jade Demon cultivators attacked the main hall. From within the main hall, cultivators from the three-world island continuously formed formations and charged out to meet the enemy cultivators. The spectating cultivators were already dumbfounded. What they were seeing had already surpassed their understanding. Lu Yi had entered the main hall alone. It was one thing for 5 Yu Yaos to charge out together, but now, even more constellations were charging out? And those constellations that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere were obviously cultivators from the three-world island. If they didn't know that the spiritual island in front of them belonged to Purple Jade, they would have thought that this was the headquarters of the three-world island. The main hall was the Array Foundation Hall. It was incomparably sturdy, which was why it was able to withstand the attacks from all directions without collapsing. But in the end, the main hall was still blasted apart. It was true that the Array Foundation Hall was protected by an array formation, and the constellations of the three-world island had activated the array formation as soon as they arrived through the portal. But how could it withstand the frenzied attacks of so many Purple Jade Yao cultivators? After the main hall was destroyed, the door was so eye-catching among the broken walls. The spectating cultivators finally understood where the Three World Islands cultivators had come from. This door was clearly the key to their success. Someone's eyes lit up as he said, when the Three World Island attacked Baiyue, many fellow Taoists did an investigation after the battle. Some fellow Taoists also asked the surviving cultivators of Baiyue about the specific situation on that day. Some things were clarified, but there was one thing that remained a mystery. Another person added, "That's right. It was said that during that battle, the Three World Islands cultivators appeared out of thin air inside Baiyue. They broke through several array foundations, causing Baiyue's defensive array formation to weaken greatly. That was why it was forcefully broken through. All this time, no one knew how the Three World Islands cultivators appeared inside Baiyue. It seems like this is the reason that Lu Yi clearly had a method to open a door to the Three World Island from another spiritual island, just like what they saw today. The mystery of Baiyue back then had been clarified. But wasn't Lu Ye's speed too fast? From the time he entered the main hall to the time Lionheart chased after him, less than 10 breaths had passed. What kind of method was this? Before they had time to think, Zixian's side changed again. When the main hall was broken through and the door was revealed, the Three World Islands cultivators were in a bad situation. Because it was still a short time, the number of Three World Islands cultivators who had descended was not many. Although the three Yu Yao charged into the formation to kill the enemies, relieving a great deal of pressure, there were still many attacks aimed at the main hall. If they were not stopped, not to mention whether the door could hold on, even if it could, the Three World Islands cultivators who walked out of the door would be in for a bad time. The moment the cultivators passed through the door was undoubtedly the moment when they were at their weakest. Fortunately, Luan Xiaoa and the others had already prepared for this situation. Beside the door, 7 late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators stood. Their positions seemed casual, but in reality, there was something mysterious about them. The 7 of them were all burly and full of vitality. They were all body cultivators, especially the one in the middle. He was the tallest and most burly of them all. His bare chest made him look simple and honest. He held a chi-linking formation disc in his hand and suddenly roared. In an instant, the chi dynamics of the 7 body cultivators were connected. Their chi and blood mingled, and there were faint roars of beasts. A huge black tortoise formation was formed. The twin chi and branch formation disc had been popular on the myriad forms C for so many years. Everyone was already familiar with some of the more common formations. The black tortoise formation was undoubtedly the most common one. 5 people were enough to form the formation, and 7 was the best. When the formation was formed, it would gain the power of the black tortoise and possess extremely strong defensive capabilities. However, this black tortoise formation that suddenly appeared seemed to be a little different from what everyone knew. The black tortoise formation formed by the black tortoise formation was too lifelike. Even the veins on its back could be seen clearly. The black tortoise formation already possessed very strong defensive capabilities. No one could say for sure how strong this black tortoise formation that looked different from the rest was. However, they soon received confirmation of their suspicions. Because countless attacks landed on the back of the black tortoise formation, they were unable to break through the formation immediately. The door under the protection of the formation remained motionless. "This formation is so powerful," someone exclaimed. The defensive capabilities of the black tortoise formation far exceeded their understanding. "Who's at the eye of the formation?" someone asked. Although the strength of the formation was closely related to all the cultivators who formed it, the one who was at the eye of the formation was undoubtedly the one who was at the eye of the formation. The person who spoke clearly realized that the difference in the black tortoise formation had a lot to do with the cultivator at the eye of the formation. This person is called Giant Armor. He's one of the most powerful constellations in the Three World Island. Elder Yu Yao, who had been at odds with Tao Wu, suddenly spoke up. "Does everyone still remember the scene when the Great Baiyue defensive formation was broken?" Someone revealed a look of reminiscence. It seems that the one who broke the Great Baiyue defensive formation was also a black tortoise formation. Even though many years had passed since that shocking scene, those who had witnessed it with their own eyes were still overwhelmed with emotion when they recalled it. That was because they knew that the Black Tortoise Formation was used for defensive purposes. Who would have thought that this formation could unleash such a terrifying attack? Elder Yu Yao said, "That's right. The Black Tortoise Formation that year was controlled by this giant armor. With the assistance of several Yu Yao from the Three-World Island, it was able to unleash such an earth-shattering attack." Tao Wu suddenly turned his head to look at him. "Fellow Taoist, you seem to know quite a bit about the Three-World Island." Elder Yu Yao chuckled. "The Three-World Island's rapid rise is a model for all of us. Naturally, we should learn more about it and imitate it." Tao Wu stared at him for a moment longer before turning his head away. It was at this moment that someone suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no, Lionheart's in trouble." Tao Wu hurriedly looked towards Lionheart's battlefield and saw that Lionheart and Lu Yi were locked in a fierce battle. Their cultivations were clearly one minor realm apart, but Lu Yi actually had the absolute upper hand. Lionheart was actually suppressed to the point where he could only defend himself. This undoubtedly meant one thing: Lionheart was no match for Lu Yi in a one-on-one battle. Of course, this might also be due to Ma Shangxi's deterrence. That guy was controlling a sea of blood that floated up and down, sweeping towards Lionheart from time to time. Lionheart definitely had to be on guard. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that while the two sides were locked in a fierce battle, a figure was silently approaching Lionheart from behind. Tao Wu focused his vision and discovered that the figure was actually Lu Yi. He immediately understood that this was Lu Ye's clone. He finally recalled that Lu Ye's clone had lured Lionheart away, but when Lionheart returned, Lu Ye's clone was nowhere to be seen. He didn't expect that Lu Yi would return at this time. Moreover, judging from the clone's posture, it was obvious that he had used a concealment technique. Lionheart, who was locked in a fierce battle with Lu Yi, didn't notice this at all. Lionheart was probably in for a bad time. Tao Wu had personally witnessed the terrifying might of Lu Ye's clone's blood explosion technique. His junior brother Tiger had died to this technique. Suddenly, spiritual energy surged in the crowd. Tao Wu abruptly turned his head and stared at an unfamiliar Yu Yao. He blinked and suddenly understood what was happening. He immediately raised his fist and punched at Yu Yao. Yu Yao's cultivation wasn't high, only at the mid-stage. How could she dodge Tao Wu's sneak attack? The punch caused Yu Yao to spit out a mouthful of blood and stagger backward. Tao Wu, however, didn't give up. His magic power surged as he hammered at Yu Yao with both fists. "Fellow Taoist, why are you doing this?" the mid-stage Yu Yao shouted as he coughed up blood. "You're an eyesore to me." Tao Wu snorted coldly and chased after him. He threw a few more punches and blasted the cultivator to smithereens. Many of the surrounding cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat. Tao Wu looked around and said coldly, "If you want to watch a good show, then watch. Don't do anything that displeases me." The lunar mansions were confused, but the Yu Yao were well aware of the situation. Tao Wu seemed to have unreasonably killed a Yu Yao cultivator, but in reality, that guy had asked for it. That guy had actually sent a message to Lionheart just now. The sudden surge of spiritual energy was the most obvious evidence. Tao Wu and Lu Yi had a personal relationship. How could Tao Wu allow this person to send a message to Lionheart in front of Tao Wu? He directly killed him. On the other side, Lionheart received the warning and finally sensed the talent tree clone behind him attacking. However, he didn't have a good way to deal with it because Lu Yi and his servant had already exhausted all of his concentration. Left with no choice, he could only activate his power to protect his back. The talent tree clone kicked out, and the powerful force caused Lionheart to stagger. Lu Yi took advantage of the momentum to attack, forcing Lionheart to dodge to the side. Ma Shangxi had been waiting for a long time. Almost at the instant the talent tree clone kicked out, she had already spread the sea of blood in that direction. End of chapter. Chapter 1864. The blood waves surged, and Lionheart fell into the sea of blood, disappearing without a trace. From the looks of it, it was as if he had thrown himself into the sea of blood. "I've finally caught him." Ma Shangxi gritted his teeth, clearly very irritated. In the past, his blood sea technique had always been successful, but this time, if it weren't for Lu Ye's talent tree clone, it would have been difficult to capture Lionheart. This made him realize one thing: some Yu Yao's strength was truly unreasonable. He himself was also a late-stage Yu Yao, but if he were to face Lionheart alone, he definitely wouldn't be a match for him. The sea of blood began to churn violently. Lionheart, who had fallen into it, knew that the situation was bad. How could he just sit there and wait for death? He immediately urged his strength to stir up the sea of blood. For a moment, Ma Shangxi felt like he couldn't suppress him. Fortunately, Lu Yi had already charged to Lionheart's side under his guidance and slashed repeatedly with his long saber. In the sea of blood, Lu Yi's expression was cold and fierce. He had to admit that Lionheart was indeed the strongest Yu Yao he had ever encountered. None of the Yu Yao he had encountered in the past could compare to him. Lionheart's strength was not only reflected in his combat ability, but also in his inconceivable physique. Yao cultivators rarely use transcendent artifacts, and neither did the Blood Tribe. However, the Blood Tribe couldn't use transcendent artifacts because of the corrosive nature of their blood arts, which greatly conflicted with transcendent artifacts. However, Yao cultivators were different. The biggest reason why Yao cultivators didn't use transcendent artifacts was because they were confident in their physique. Many Yao cultivators, after taking human form, would often temper a part of their body so that they could unleash power comparable to transcendent artifacts or even transcendent artifacts. Moreover, every Yao cultivator was naturally proficient in their own clan's demonic arts. It could be said that Yao cultivators were basically dual cultivators of body and magic. For example, when Lu Yi had killed that red elephant Yu Yao under Zi Xian's sneak attack, she had swung her long trunk before she died. The power of that blow was not inferior to that of a transcendent artifact. Lionheart didn't have any body parts that were specially tempered. He had refined his entire body into an existence comparable to a transcendent artifact. His long lifespan and countless years of immersion in Yu Yao's later stages gave him plenty of time to do this. His body had already been tempered to the extreme. Every punch and kick was a magical treasure-level attack. No matter who it was, they wouldn't have a good ending. Therefore, even though Lu Ye's Mountain Ascension blade was incomparably sharp and reinforced by the Divine Edge Spirit inscriptions, it couldn't cause too much damage to Lionheart's body. In fact, it could only break through his skin. Lu Yi had originally planned to use his precious blood doppelgangers to kill Lionheart. However, Lionheart's physique was so strong that he had to give up on this plan. Since he only had one Panshan saber, it would be useless to have more precious blood doppelgangers. He even took back his talent tree doppelganger. Lu Yi couldn't help but recall the time when he fought against Hikari, who was a realm higher than him. When his own attack wasn't enough to break through the enemy's defense, his successful slash often didn't play much of a role. Unless he used the Great Pinwheel Mystic technique and slashed at the same spot countless times. But how could Lionheart give Lu Yi such a chance? Therefore, all Lu Yi could do was suppress Lionheart, but there was no way he could achieve any real results. However, things were different now. The powerful Purple Jade Island Lord had fallen into the Blood Sea. As long as Ma Shangxi could stabilize the situation, Lionheart would die sooner or later. As the Blood Sea rolled, Lionheart roared. Every time this happened, the Blood Sea would roll more violently. This kind of invisible sound attack was impossible for Ma Shangxi to avoid. Lu Ye's figure shuttled back and forth in the Blood Sea. Every time he slashed at Lionheart's body, the sound of metal clashing against metal could be heard. Lionheart was like a beast trapped in a cage. He had no room to display his unreasonable strength because he couldn't even grasp the enemy's whereabouts. Under the repeated slashes, a real wound finally appeared on Lionheart's body. Ma Shangxi had been waiting for this moment. He immediately became excited, like a shark that had smelled fish, and immediately activated the blood tracing technique. Blood kept flowing out of the small wound. At first, there was only one wound, but as time passed, more and more wounds appeared. Lionheart's huge body became bloody. He sensed that something was wrong. With his powerful physique, he was confident that no one on Yu Yao's level could do anything to him. But today, he was shocked to discover that there really was someone in this world who could break through his powerful body. If that was all, it wouldn't be a big deal. Lu Yi had done this by repeatedly slashing at the same spot. With his physique, such wounds could heal in the blink of an eye. But in reality, he could clearly sense a strange power lingering around his wounds. The wounds that should have healed quickly showed no signs of improvement. Not only that, but there was also a mysterious power coming from the blood sea, guiding his blood to quickly flow out of his wounds. The secret killing technique that Lu Yi and his servant had developed together was beginning to show results. The special nature of the mountain plate saber and the blood tracing technique were a match made in heaven. The battle in the blood sea continued, but because of the blood sea's concealment, the spectating cultivators couldn't see what was happening inside. Disappointed, they could only look toward Purple Jade Island. In this short period of time, the situation on Purple Jade Island had changed greatly. The Black Tortoise Formation led by Giant Armor was still maintained, protecting the door. But now, the pressure they had to endure was clearly not as great. This was because more and more Three-World Island cultivators were walking out of the door and quickly forming a formation. They occupied the four corners and resisted the oncoming attacks. Therefore, even though Purple Jade Island had the advantage in numbers, they couldn't achieve any results. In terms of strategy, one side was attacking, while the other side was defending. In comparison, the Three-World Island as the defending side had a great advantage. Moreover, the three late-stage Yu Yao cultivators from the Three-World Island were slaughtering as they pleased. No one could stop them. In the sky, the Purple Jade Island cultivators fell like dumplings into a pot. The spectating cultivators couldn't help but hold their breaths. This was because they realized one thing. Regardless of their positions, likes and dislikes, they were witnessing a historic moment. This was a battle that would go down in the annals of the Wanxiang Sea. For so many years, ever since the top forces moved into the Wanxiang Sea and occupied the top-grade spiritual islands, there had never been a case of a top-grade spiritual island being breached and having a change of ownership. Of course, the Peerless Island didn't count. Although it was a top-grade spiritual island, it wasn't occupied by the top forces. Today, however, they were about to witness it with their own eyes. The top forces of the Wanxiang Sea had occupied the top-grade spiritual islands for tens of thousands of years. The situation was finally about to be broken. And the ones who did this were cultivators from a top-grade spiritual island. The Purple Jade Island cultivators' strategy of attacking the door had completely failed. This was because no more Three-World Island cultivators had descended from the door. All the cultivators from the Three-World Island had gathered on the battlefield. The existence of the door no longer mattered. The cultivators from the Three-World Island who had descended used the Broken Formation Foundation Hall as the center and quickly built a defense against the enemy cultivators who were attacking from all directions. Giant Armor and the others retreated with blood all over their bodies. During the battle just now, the Black Tortoise Formation they formed had turned into a trustworthy defensive shield for their companions at the most crucial moment. However, even such a Black Tortoise Formation was broken by the Purple Jade cultivators in the end. The seven-body cultivators all vomited blood as they retreated. Medical cultivators were already waiting for them and quickly took over their treatment. If Meng Jie hadn't summoned his conch and formed a defense when the Black Tortoise Formation was broken, there would have been casualties on the Three-World Island side. On the Three-World Island side, the strongest defense formed by the Lunar Mansions wasn't the Black Tortoise Formation, but Meng Jie's conch. That thing was the true treasure. Previously, it had played a huge role in the battle against Baiyu. Today, it still played a huge role. Wan Xiao, Yan Miao, and He Baichuan, the three late-stage Moon Jade cultivators, shuttled back and forth among the enemy cultivators as if there was no one around. While they killed the enemy, they didn't forget to provide timely support to their lunar mansions. Wherever the pressure was great, they would go and kill for a while to relieve the pressure on their defense. As time passed, more and more Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators died in battle. Around the defensive perimeter formed by the Three-World Islands cultivators, there were countless broken bodies and broken limbs. Fresh blood gathered on the ground and formed a small river that flowed in all directions. Countless spectating cultivators gasped in amazement. Up until now, even if they were at a clear disadvantage, even if they didn't have any Moon Jade cultivators to help them, the Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators still maintained their unparalleled fighting spirit. Not a single Yao cultivator fled or retreated. Many times, even if they knew that they would die, they still charged forward without hesitation. This tragic scene could be seen almost everywhere on the battlefield. The spectating cultivators couldn't bear to see it, but at the same time, they were filled with admiration. As expected of the Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators. This tenacity and courage to fight without fear of death. Cultivators from ordinary factions can't compare at all. With so many cultivators in the realm, why should they worry about not being strong in the future? I'm afraid Purple Jade is finished. Now, let's see if Lionheart can escape. Even if Lionheart escapes, it won't change the outcome. Purple Jade's defeat is a foregone conclusion. Fellow Taoists, have you noticed? Purple Jade has suffered heavy losses, but the Three-World Island doesn't seem to have a single casualty. How could the others not notice this? Because the Three-World Island's cultivators had always been on the defensive, and the three late-stage Moon Jade cultivators had reduced the pressure on them. Thus, up until now, although many had been injured, not a single one had died. In the battle against Baiyue, the Three-World Island achieved a terrifying result of 0 casualties. Now that they're facing Purple Jade, they can't do the same, right? If that was really the case, it would be too terrifying. It would be fine if they were able to do this against Baiyue, but this was Purple Jade, a top-tier spiritual island occupied by a top-tier faction. It was on a completely different level from Baiyue. However, judging from the current situation, as long as the Three-World Island fought steadily, it wouldn't be difficult for them to do this. The cultivators could almost foresee one thing. Today's battle would be talked about enthusiastically for years to come. Back when the Three-World Island attacked Baiyue, the cultivators of the Myriad Domain had discussed it for several years. This time, it would definitely not be any worse. Almost everyone felt that the situation wouldn't change much. The only variable now was whether or not Lionheart could escape. However, at this moment, a cold shout suddenly rang out from within Purple Jade Island. Cultivators of the Three-World Island, heed my command. Follow me and kill the enemy. When the order was given, the spectating cultivators were still stunned. The cultivators of the Three-World Island, who had been on the defensive, quickly moved. In the blink of an eye, they abandoned their impenetrable defensive formation. Instead, the 2,000 cultivators split into 3 groups like 3 long dragons. Wan Xiao, Yan Miao, and He Baichuan, the 3 late-stage Moon Jade cultivators, took the initiative to come forward and take the lead. Faint dragon roars could be heard. The 3 long dragons formed by the cultivators of the Three-World Island were like true flood dragons emerging from the sea. They charged in 3 different directions. End of chapter. Chapter 1865. What is the Three-World Island doing? Seeing the changes in Z Jade's battle situation, the spectating cultivators were all confused. They were clearly shocked by the sudden change in the Three-World Island strategy. According to the development of the situation just now, the Three-World Island didn't need to make any changes at all. As long as they fought steadily, they would be able to take Z Jade without paying too much of a price. They would even have the chance to achieve a record of 0 casualties, just like when they attacked the U. However, they didn't choose to do so. They abandoned their original defensive position. Under the lead of the 3 late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators, 2,000 cultivators turned into 3 long dragons and charged into the enemy army. Not only were the spectating cultivators stunned, but the Z Jade Yao cultivators were also stunned. No one expected the Three-World Island to make such a shocking decision. As such, after the 3 long dragons soared into the sky, even more deaths occurred. Originally, the 3 late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators were responsible for killing the enemy. However, no matter how strong they were, killing the star constellations was like chopping vegetables. There was a limit to their efficiency. However, things were different now. The Three-World Island's entire army was attacking. Z Jade was overwhelmed, and hundreds of star constellations were killed in an instant. Using offense as defense, the three-world island wants to end the battle quickly to avoid unnecessary trouble. Someone saw through the three-world island's intentions. After all, something had happened during the previous attack on the U. In the end, even the Sunshine Protectors had arrived. The Battle of the U could affect the Sunshine Protectors. Now that they were attacking Zixian, the attention of all 5 Sunshine Protectors would be gathered here. If one of the Sunshine Protectors stood out, the three-world island would have a hard time dealing with it. Although the chances of this happening were low, they had to be careful. Thus, even though they knew that they could take Z Jade as long as they fought steadily, the three-world island couldn't let the battle drag on. However, taking the initiative to attack was different. It could greatly reduce the time needed to end the battle. As far as the eyes of the cultivators could see, the 3 dragons of the three-world island were like 3 torrents. Wherever they went, everything was destroyed. The Z Jade Yao cultivators were fearless, but in the face of absolute power, they were so weak and laughable. What shocked the cultivators even more was that the Z Jade Yao cultivators' tenacity had already left a deep impression on them, but the three-world islands cultivators seemed even more ruthless. Not a single one of the several thousand cultivators from both sides was afraid of death. All this time, everyone's impression of the cultivators from the Three Worlds Island had remained at the stage where they had attacked the U country. However, that battle had gone smoothly for the cultivators from the Three Worlds Island. Truth be told, the cultivators from the Three Worlds Island did not display too much bravery. Later on, the cultivators from the Three Worlds Island began giving off the impression that they were merchants. That was especially true of Tang Jun, who would smile at everyone he met. At this moment, after witnessing this shocking battle with their own eyes, the cultivators of the 10,000 Expanse Sea finally realized that the cultivators of the Three-World Island weren't harmless merchants. They were a group of murderers that would kill and burn anyone who dared to offend them. Even if you have Zixian's great reputation. That's right. If they were not a bunch of lawless people, why would they attack a spiritual island like Zixian? The battle was intense, and the Z Jade Yao cultivators had suffered heavy casualties. Originally, Zixian had twice the number of cultivators from the Three-World Island. However, as the battle progressed, the number of cultivators on both sides was already equal. In fact, the Three-World Island's cultivators were even more numerous. In the face of the Three-World Island's wanton slaughter, the Z Jade Yao cultivators wanted to organize a resistance. However, even if they did, without Yu Yao leading them, they would not be able to contend against the Three-World Island. Despair began to grow and spread. The Z Jade Yao cultivators' fearlessness and bravery seemed to have undergone some subtle changes. Go, all of you, go! A lion's roar suddenly rang out, resounding through heaven and earth. The spectating cultivators immediately turned their heads and looked towards the boiling sea of blood. They realized that it was Lionheart's roar. Lionheart was trapped by Ma Shangxi's blood sea technique, unable to escape. Although he was not clear about the exact situation of the battle outside, he could still sense it with his divine perception. Too many Z Jade Yao cultivators had died. He was the only one left on the entire Z Jade Island, and Yu Yao was still trapped here. The main island was completely powerless against the Three-World Island's attack. If this continued, all the Z Jade Yao cultivators would be wiped out. They could only escape. Even if they were pursued, it was still better than being wiped out in one fell swoop. That was why he had shouted the order. The Z Jade Yao cultivators were already bitterly holding on. Their initial drive had been worn out. Now that the first island master had given the order, many of them no longer hesitated and scattered in all directions. Kill. Don't let a single one of them go. Wan Xiao shouted coldly. This dignified and magnanimous woman's eyes were burning with hatred and fury. Wei Po was a cultivator of her Jade Conch sect. He had finally advanced to Yu Yao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but Lionheart had swallowed him alive. In terms of hatred for Z Jade, she was the most intense. The Three-World Island masters suddenly dispersed, forming a formation once again. They chased after the fleeing Z Jade Yao cultivators. Z Jade was finished. This thought appeared in the minds of all the spectating cultivators. Although they had already expected this halfway through the battle, when such an outcome actually occurred, it still felt incomparably surreal. A high-grade spiritual island had been taken down by a top-grade spiritual island with only half of the enemy's forces. Moreover, the time taken this time was even shorter than the previous time when they attacked Baiyu. They had achieved a decisive result in almost half a day. Even if they witnessed such a ridiculous thing with their own eyes, they still dared not believe it. At this moment, a shocking and terrifying energy aura suddenly spread out from a certain direction. Everyone couldn't help but turn their heads in that direction. When they saw the source of the energy aura, they were all shocked. This was because that was where the blood sea was spread out. Lu Yi, Ma Shangxi, and Lionheart were fighting over it. The aura that suddenly surged out was frighteningly fierce. Although it wasn't at the level of sunshine, it was definitely at the peak of the Yu Yao level. Lionheart took out his Yao core. Someone exclaimed in shock. This kind of aura could not be produced by ordinary means. The only possibility was that Lionheart had taken out the Yao core that he had refined for thousands of years. This was the desperate struggle of a peak late-stage Yu Yao cultivator. It was hard to imagine what had happened in the blood sea that Lionheart had been forced to such an extent. Almost at the same time that person finished speaking, a golden light suddenly bloomed in the boundless blood sea. The golden light in the midst of the blood sea was so dazzling. In the next instant, the golden light suddenly expanded, as if a great sun had exploded. An incomparably terrifying energy swept out in all directions, and a huge hole appeared in the blood sea. Under the illumination of the golden light, Lionheart's contorted figure could be vaguely seen. Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi were nowhere to be seen. When the master and servant realized that Lionheart had taken out his Yao core, they immediately retreated far away. This was a desperate struggle, and even Lu Yi didn't dare to underestimate it. Not only that, Lu Yi even activated his defensive spirit runes to protect his body. The blood sea shook, and Ma Shangxi cried out in shock. Following that, he coughed violently. It was obvious that he had been injured by Lionheart's terrifying attack. Several of the defensive runes on Lu Ye's body also shattered, and this was under the premise that Ma Shangxi's blood sea was protecting him. From this, one could see how terrifying Lionheart's attack was. However, his eyes were incomparably bright because he knew that this was Lionheart's final attack. 4 Yao cultivators, taking out their Yao core was something they would only do as a last resort. After this attack, their vitality would be greatly damaged. Without waiting for the terrifying energy to subside, Lu Yi pounced in Lionheart's direction. However, before he arrived, he saw Lionheart turn to look at him, his face extremely pale. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Today's grudge will be repaid 100-fold in the future." As he spoke, his body suddenly emitted a rich purple light. Lu Ye's figure suddenly sped up, and with a leap, he arrived at Lionheart's location. The magic power on his mountain saber surged, and all his strength was poured into this attack as it fiercely chopped down. The saber struck empty air. The moment before the saber landed, the burly figure of Lionheart suddenly disappeared. The flesh on Lu Ye's saber-wielding right arm was torn because he had used all his strength just now, causing his right arm to bear too much of a burden. However, he didn't seem to feel anything. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed with his divine sense. The blood sea closed, and Ma Shangxi rushed to Lu Ye's side. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and asked in confusion, "Where is he?" There was no reason for such a large Lionheart to disappear for no reason. Teleportation talisman. Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look in a certain direction. "Over here." As soon as he finished speaking, a drop of precious blood exploded, and wrapped in a layer of bloody light, he chased after Lionheart. Ma Shangxi was taken aback and hurriedly chased after Lu Yi, but he had just been struck by the aftermath of Lionheart's monster core attack and his aura was unstable, so there was no way he could catch up. Soon, the bloody light wrapped around Lu Yi disappeared from his sight, leaving him with no choice but to turn around and chase after the fleeing purple jade monster cultivators. A few years ago, when the Western Heart Mountain Road crossed the 10,000 Elephant Sea, They made deals with many forces in exchange for various resources needed by the hominid tribe. Although Purple Jade Island wasn't interested in magic treasures, they were still very interested in talismans. Of course, they had also made deals with the hominid tribe. The teleportation talisman on Lionheart's body was made by the hominid tribe. The distance and speed it could teleport him was much faster than the teleportation talismans refined by other cultivators. However, the teleportation talisman had a bad problem, and that was that once it was activated, it was impossible to control where it would teleport him to. Teleportation talismans were mostly used to save one's life at critical moments. The red talisman on Lu Ye's body was a teleportation talisman used for escape. Because it was a red talisman, its effects were definitely better than Lionheart's. Normally, if Lionheart activated the teleportation talisman and left, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to find out where he went. At that time, Lionheart would only need to find a place to hide and he would be able to escape with his life. However, during the previous battle, Lionheart's body had been wounded countless times, and those wounds still contained remnant brightness power. Lu Yi didn't know where Lionheart had been teleported to, but as long as they weren't too far apart, he could use the mountain plate saber to sense the brightness power and find him. As long as Lionheart didn't die, he wouldn't be able to avenge Wei Pe. How could he allow Lionheart to continue living? End of chapter. Chapter 1866. Lionheart was heavily injured, and he had sacrificed his monster core to fight to the death. His vitality must have been greatly damaged. This was the perfect opportunity to eliminate him. With the help of the mountain plate blade, Lu Yi could vaguely sense traces of Fang's power in a certain direction. That was undoubtedly where Lionheart was. With the support of his precious blood, Lu Ye's blood escape was pushed to the limit. His entire body turned into a beam of light. As time passed, he could sense the Fang power more clearly. This meant that the distance between them was gradually closing. However, Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. This was because he could sense that Lionheart was fleeing in the direction of the Island of Versatility. After a moment's thought, Lu Yi saw through Lionheart's thoughts. Indeed, now that Z Jade had been destroyed and many of Z Jade's monster cultivators had died, he was the only one left on Yu Yao's level. If he wanted to survive, he had to find a place to recuperate. The Island of Versatility was undoubtedly his best and only choice. Realizing this, Lu Yi immediately took out the star chart of the Island of Versatility to verify his current location. He then estimated Lionheart's location and compared their speeds. His frown deepened. According to his calculations, if he continued to pursue Lionheart like this, all his efforts would be in vain. Lionheart was obviously much closer to the Island of Versatility. Therefore, even if Lionheart's speed was slower than his, he would still reach the Island of Versatility first. Once Lionheart entered the Island of Versatility, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to succeed. He couldn't possibly break into the Island of Versatility to kill someone. That would be courting death. After a moment's thought, Lu Yi changed his original plan. He immediately changed his direction and flew directly towards the Island of Versatility. Since he didn't have enough time, he would intercept Lionheart before the Island of Versatility. At this moment, an old man sat in a palace on the Island of Versatility. In front of him was a seductive woman with a seductive figure and a seductive appearance, who was sobbing softly with a pitiful expression on her face. Not far to the side of the old man, Yuan Cheng stood there respectfully with his head bowed. To be treated so respectfully by Yuan Cheng in a place like this undoubtedly revealed the old man's identity. He was Yuan Du, one of the 5 Sunshine Guardians of the Island of Versatility. In the quiet environment, only the gentle sobbing of the charming woman could be heard. Yuan Cheng did not dare to speak. He only checked his notes from time to time to receive information from the outside. "How's the situation?" Yuan Du suddenly asked. Only then did Yuan Cheng reply. "Patriarch, Zixian has been broken." Lionheart ordered Zixian's Yao cultivators to flee while he sacrificed his Yao core for a desperate attack. Then he used the spirit talisman to escape. What a piece of trash! Yuan Du coldly snorted. From his point of view, he could not understand how Zixian could be so useless. According to his original plan, Zixian only needed to lure Lu Yi to the island and kill him, then she could quickly send troops to attack the three-world island. Even if they didn't kill Lu Yi, Zixian could still send out her troops. However, once the conflict started, the development of the war was completely different from what they had expected. Zixian suffered heavy losses while Three-World Island remained peaceful and undisturbed by the flames of war. In the end, Zixian failed to attack the Three-World Island. Instead, the cultivators of the Three-World Island descended from the heavens and attacked Zixian. Now, even Lionheart had begun to flee. Is that Lu Yi really that strong? Yuan Du looked at Yuan Cheng and asked. Yuan Cheng couldn't help but recall the scene at the banquet. At that time, Lu Yi had rushed straight towards him, and he had almost thought he was dead for sure. Fortunately, Lu Yi had changed his target at the critical moment and killed his junior brother Hu. Only later did he learn that it was just a clone of Lu Yi. Judging from the information we've gathered so far, he is indeed qualified to be the strongest person under the sun, Yuan Cheng replied cautiously. Even Yu Yao, who was as strong as Lionheart, had been forced to flee in panic. In this vast universe, which Yu Yao could be his match? Ooh. The soft sobs suddenly grew louder and the charming woman who had been lying in front of Yuan Du burst into tears. She raised her head and looked at Yuan Du pitifully. My poor clan brother died so miserably. So many of my clansmen were also killed. Lord husband, you have to avenge them. Old Tang had once told Lu Yi that this old man Yuan Du didn't have any other hobbies, but he had a lot of concubines. Among the few most favored concubines, there was a six-tailed fox from the amethyst demonic star named Hu Shui. As a member of the six-tailed fox clan, Hu Shui naturally had some relationship with Hu Guang. When news of Hu Guang's death reached her, she immediately came to Yuan Du and cried her heart out. That was why Yuan Du had come to ask Yuan Cheng about it. Hearing Hu Shui cry at this moment, Yuan Du felt a headache coming on. Hu Guang was killed by Lu Yi during the competition between the two islands. Even if Yuan Du had great ability, he couldn't avenge Hu Shui. If he did, the rules that had been maintained for countless years in the Myriad Phenomenon Galaxy would inevitably be broken. However, he really loved this concubine, and he couldn't just brush her off in front of her face, so he could only sigh and say, "Get up and talk." Hu Shui sobbed, "If you don't agree, I won't get up." Only Hu Shui dared to speak to Yuan Du like this. If it were any other concubine he didn't favor, Yuan Du would have already kicked them. But how could he agree to this? Yuan Du could only patiently say, that Lu Yi must die, but we need to think of a good way. This matter needs to be discussed at length. Hu Shui wanted to say something more, but after meeting Yuan Du's gaze, she quickly swallowed her words, got up, wiped the corners of her eyes and said, "You said it yourself. When we go back and kill Lu Yi, I want to see him die with my own eyes." She was not a fool. How could a member of the six-tailed fox clan be stupid? Although she could be arrogant because she was pampered, there was a limit to everything. She also knew that no matter how she acted coquettishly, Yuan Du wouldn't kill Lu Yi himself, but she needed Yuan Du to express his stance. Good, Yuan Du agreed. Only then did Hu Shui stand behind Yuan Du with satisfaction, raising her jade-like hands and gently kneading them, showing her incomparably docile behavior. Her clothes were extremely revealing, and her snow-white skin was dazzling to the eyes, but Yuan Cheng didn't dare to look at it and kept his head down. Suddenly, the sound talisman moved again. Yuan Cheng hurriedly checked and looked up. "Ancestor, Lionheart sent a message." "Trash, you still have the face to send a message." Yuan Du couldn't help cursing, impatiently asking, "What did he say?" Yuan Cheng said, "He said he's on his way to the all-encompassing island. His injuries are serious and he needs to come to Ancestor's place to recuperate." Yuan Du coldly snorted, "Sacrificing his monster core will indeed greatly injure his vitality, and he needs a great pill to recover. Looking at the entire all-encompassing island, coming to my place is indeed his best choice." Then, Yuan Cheng said tentatively. Yuan Du sighed. "In the end, he's Zixian's. It's not good to leave him alone. Go greet him." Yuan Qing complied. This mistress will go with you. When I was in Zixian, senior brother Lionheart took good care of me, like an elder brother. Now that he's in trouble, this mistress will go see if there's anything I can help with, Hu Shui said softly. Go. Yuan Du waved his hand. Of course he wouldn't refuse such a small matter. Yuan Cheng and Hu Shui flew out together, Yuan Qing in front and Hu Shui behind. This wasn't because Yuan Cheng was rude, but because Hu Shui's attire made it difficult for him to walk behind her. If he really walked behind her, he wouldn't know where to look. Soon, the two left the all-encompassing island and stood somewhere outside the island, waiting for Lionheart's arrival. How long will it take? Hu Shui asked. Yuan Cheng said, I just contacted fellow Taoist Lionheart. He's very close. He should be here in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Hu Shui slightly nodded, standing there elegantly. Many cultivators passing by couldn't help but look at her, but Hu Shui didn't seem to notice. Suddenly, a powerful aura rapidly approached from the side. Its speed was simply unimaginable. Hu Shui and Yuan Qing couldn't help but turn their heads in that direction and saw a ball of red light. The red light suddenly stopped not far away from them, revealing a hidden figure. His figure was as straight as a sword, his aura astonishing, his face young, and his expression cold. Yuan Cheng was shocked. Lu Yi? Why would this guy appear here? Indeed, according to the various reports he had received, Lu Yi had chased after Lionheart and left. But if he had been chasing after Lionheart, how could he have appeared in this place? He should have been behind Lionheart. Something was wrong. Yuan Cheng's heart thumped. He's Lu Yi. Beside Yuan Cheng, Hu Shui immediately shot her gaze over. Her beautiful eyes that were like stars were filled with rage and killing intent as she stared fixedly at him. She had just begged Yuan Du to kill Lu Yi, but she didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, the real culprit would appear right under her nose. Even though she was extremely shrewd, she couldn't suppress the killing intent in her heart. The two of them spoke one after the other, but Lu Yi only glanced at them indifferently before looking away. Although he didn't know Hu Shui, he recognized Yuan Cheng at a glance. After all, he had met him twice, but both times he didn't leave a good impression on Yuan Cheng. As for Hu Shui, Lu Yi could feel the demonic aura on her, and with her stunning beauty, he could vaguely guess her identity. The first thought that came to his mind was, why are these two people here? But soon he had a guess. Yuan Cheng seemed to be waiting for someone here, and judging from where Yuan Cheng was looking, the person he was waiting for was Lionheart, who had fled to the island of versatility. Lu Yi immediately understood that Lionheart must have sent a message to Yuan Cheng, which was why Yuan Cheng was waiting here. In other words, he hadn't arrived too late, and Lionheart was approaching. This undoubtedly proved that his previous strategy was correct. He should have rushed directly to the island of versatility to intercept Lionheart. Island Lord Zixian must die today. Just as he was thinking this, a black dot at the edge of his field of vision rushed over, but because it was in poor condition, it wasn't very fast. And from where the black dot was, he could clearly sense the power of brightness. Lu Yi shook the long saber in his hand and rushed forward to meet it. End of chapter. Chapter 1867. Just as Lionheart was about to arrive, Lu Yi suddenly rushed over with a murderous look on his face. No matter how stupid Yuan Cheng was, he knew what was going to happen. Sensing that something was wrong, he hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Zixian and Yu Yao were the only ones left. No matter what, they had to save Lionheart's life. In a daze, he couldn't help but recall the battle between Three World Island and Baiyu. At the last moment, Yu Huan was the only one left on Yu Yao's side. At that time, he wanted to save Yu Huan, but Lu Yi didn't care at all. History was shockingly similar. Because today, Lu Yi had no intention of paying attention to him at all. Yuan Cheng was anxious. If Lionheart was killed in front of him, he wouldn't be able to explain it to Yuan Du. Just as he was wondering what to do, Hu Shui suddenly made her move. With a flip of her jade-like hand, she summoned something that looked like a disc array. Then she shouted, "Go!" With a wave of her hand, she sent the object flying. Yuan Cheng's eyes narrowed. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't." But how could he make it in time? Hu Shui turned to look at Yuan Cheng with a smug look in her eyes. Help senior brother Lionheart and take him back to recuperate. In the next moment, strange ripples that could be seen with the naked eye spread through her body, and Hu Shui's entire body suddenly disappeared. Along with her, Lu Yi, who was facing Lionheart's attack, also disappeared. In fact, when Hu Shui suddenly attacked him, he had sensed it and dodged. This was because he did not know what Hu Shui had attacked him with. But no matter what it was, since he had already deduced Hu Shui's identity, he did not want to be too entangled with this woman. However, the disc-like object suddenly bloomed with a faint light beside him. Then, ripples spread out and radiated in all directions. Then, he felt a strange aura lock onto him. His vision turned black and changed. At this time, Yuan Cheng's face was ashen. Hu Shui and Lu Yi disappeared at the same time. Even the disc-like treasure Hu Shui had sent out disappeared. This made him feel like a disaster was imminent. Hu Shui didn't have much contact with Lu Yi. After so many years, she had been favored by Yuan Du. Apart from being obedient and docile in front of Yuan Du, she was basically unscrupulous in front of others. She probably felt that because of her special status, Lu Yi wouldn't do anything to her. That was why she took out that treasure to restrict Lu Yi's movements and protect Lionheart. But after Yuan Cheng came into contact with Lu Yi a few times, he discovered that this guy was a lunatic, a true lawless person. Even if Hu Shui's identity was special, he couldn't guarantee that Lu Yi wouldn't kill her. If Hu Shui's actions angered Lu Yi and she died under Lu Yi's blade, the consequences would be far worse than killing Lionheart. Yuan Cheng shuddered and could only pray that Lu Yi was not too crazy, otherwise even if he killed Hu Shui, he would not be able to escape death today. All of this had happened so suddenly that Yuan Cheng didn't even have time to react. Shocked, he couldn't help but sigh at how quickly Hu Shui had thought things through. Based on the current situation, this was indeed the best way to protect Lionheart. If it weren't for that treasure restraining Lu Yi, Lionheart would definitely die when Lu Yi faced him head-on. In an inexplicable space, Lu Yi suddenly appeared. As he looked around, he frowned. This was because he was in a void filled with asteroids of all sizes. At this moment, he was standing on a small asteroid. He slowly turned his head and saw an enchanting figure quietly standing there. The battle stage. Lu Yi immediately understood what had happened. Hu Shui had taken out the battle stage and pulled him into the space of the battle stage. Lu Yi was no stranger to battle stages. There were battle stages in the 9 provinces, and they were a kind of rare treasure. However, the battle stage in the 9 provinces was actually not a true treasure. It was merely a tool created by Little Nine. Once the person who possessed this kind of tool activated the battle stage, they would be able to connect with the mysteries of the heavens and create a special space for one-on-one battles. They would not rest until they were dead. The reason it was called a prop was because once the battle stages in the 9 provinces were separated from the 9 provinces, they had no effect. They required the support of the 9 provinces' secrets of the heavens to be effective. The prop created by Little Nine was undoubtedly born from the real battle stage. In fact, it was not just the battle stage. There were many rare treasures in the 9 provinces that could be found in the starry sky. What Hu Shui had taken out was undoubtedly the real battle stage. Moreover, the might that this rare treasure could unleash was much greater than the inferior products in the 9 provinces. After the battle stages in the 9 provinces were activated, they could not provide any assistance to the holder of the battle stage. But the real battle stage was different. Hu Shui was the owner of the battle stage. She had a very large degree of control over this rare treasure. With this treasure, she could fight against those of a higher cultivation level. The other biggest difference was that once the inferior products in the 9 provinces were activated, unless one of the 2 sides died, the other side would not be able to escape. But the real battle stage would not be like this. Lu Yi stared at Hu Shui and shouted fiercely, "Release!" As the owner of the battle stage, Hu Shui could take the initiative to release it. Lionheart was about to arrive. Lu Yi did not have the time to waste here, especially when his opponent was a monster that was related to Yuan Du. She was not easy to fight, nor was she easy to kill. Tangling with her would only be a waste of time. Wishful thinking. Hu Shui clenched her teeth. Her enchanting and charming expression had been replaced by ruthlessness. When she had begged Yuan Du to kill Lu Yi, she had only been retreating in order to advance. She knew that Yuan Du would not agree to such a thing. But she had never imagined that she would have the chance to personally kill her enemy. She also had a late-stage Yu Yao cultivation. With the support of the battle stage, she was confident that she was not inferior to any Yu Yao. Even if Lionheart was here, she could still fight him. So when she saw Lu Yi, she immediately realized that this was a chance for revenge. That was why she had decisively taken out the battle stage and caught Lu Yi by surprise. Moreover, she could also save Lionheart. It could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. As she spoke, monster essence surged around Hu Shui. An inexplicable power descended from the sky. Lu Yi immediately saw bright runes lighting up all around him. In the blink of an eye, they formed a large array, trapping him within. The great array was attached to the battle stage. It was not Hu Shui's own ability. But as the owner of the battle stage, she could mobilize the might of the great array at any time. In the blink of an eye, the entrapment array had taken shape. The area around Lu Yi had turned into a cage. Immediately after, even more bright lines flashed within the cage. One great array after another quickly took shape. First trap, then kill. This was Hu Shui's confidence in dealing with Lu Yi. With the support of the battle stage, no Yu Yao could break through the entrapment array. So, there was only one thing she needed to do, and that was to constantly mobilize the might of the great array and kill Lu Yi here. Energy suddenly erupted as the might of the great array began to erupt. Within the entrapment array, golden light flashed and flames soared into the sky. A mysterious power swept out in all directions, flattening everything. Hu Shui's eyes flashed with a myriad of colors. Lu Ye's figure had long disappeared. She laughed heartily. The so-called number one under the sun was nothing more than this. Her laughter came to an abrupt halt because Hu Shui was surprised to discover that a crack had suddenly appeared on the barrier of the entrapment array. From within the entrapment array, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly erupted. But the source of this aura was not the array she had activated. Kacha. A series of cracking sounds rang out as the cracks on the barrier of the entrapment array suddenly spread out in all directions. How could this be? Hu Shui was dumbfounded. As the master of the battle stage, she could clearly sense just how terrifying the power that had suddenly erupted was. It was simply beyond her understanding. In her shock, Hu Shui's divine sense surged as she hurriedly tried to stabilize the entrapment array. As long as she could stabilize it, she would have a chance to repair it. However, she no longer had that chance. With a loud crash, the entrapment array barrier completely shattered. The entrapment array that she had placed all her hopes on didn't even last for 3 breaths of time. The moment the entrapment array shattered, the power of the many great arrays she had activated swept out in all directions. At the same time, the phantom of a black tortoise suddenly rushed out from the violent energy and pounced towards her. Hu Shui was dumbfounded because when she looked around, she saw 1, 2, 3, a total of 7 Lu Yis forming a black tortoise array. Every Lu Yi was vivid and lifelike, and every Lu Yi exuded the aura of a mid-stage Yu Yao. Admittedly, the entrapment array was incomparably sturdy, and it was beyond the scope of Yu Yao's ability to break through. However, 7 mid-stage Yu Yao, even a black tortoise like Lu Yi couldn't break through the entrapment array. Hu Shui cried out in alarm as she hurriedly retreated. At the same time, she continuously mobilized the power of the battle stage to launch a ferocious attack to obstruct Lu Yi. However, it was completely ineffective. It was true that she had the support of the battle stage and could borrow the power of this place, but the power that Lu Ye's true body and the precious blood avatar could display when they formed a formation was truly beyond the scope of Yu Yao's power. Suddenly, the black tortoise array closed in. The phantom of the black tortoise raised a palm and ruthlessly slammed it down. With a miserable scream, Hu Shui was sent flying, blood spurting from her mouth. In that instant, she thought that she was dead for sure. Her delicate body slammed into a meteorite, and she cut an extremely sorry figure. Before she could get up, an ice-cold blade pressed against her slender white neck. When she looked up, Lu Ye's indifferent face looked down from above. Release! Sensing Lu Ye's dense killing intent, Hu Shui couldn't help but shudder. However, when she recalled the scene just now, she calmed down and sneered, "You should know who I am. Do you dare to kill me?" The reason she made such a deduction was that when the black tortoise attacked, the young man in front of her had obviously held back. Otherwise, she would have had no chance of surviving that attack. The fact that the other party held back meant that he was afraid of something, and he was afraid of none other than Yuan Du. While provoking Lu Yi, all kinds of thoughts flashed through her mind. Calculating the time, Lionheart shouldn't have reached the island of versatility yet. Therefore, no matter what, she couldn't release the battle stage and set Lu Yi free. No matter what, she had to buy some time. I'll count to 3. Lu Ye's long blade pressed down slightly, and the sharp edge of the blade cut through Hu Shui's skin. 1. The blade pressed down again, cutting open her flesh and causing dark red blood to flow out. 2. He activated his transcendence energy and poured it into the long blade. The blade sank an inch into her flesh. His killing intent was so condensed that it was almost tangible. End of chapter. Chapter 1868. Against Zi Xian, everything was going according to plan. Using the minor constellation hall to break Zi Xian's defensive formation, he first killed Bao Yuyu, then killed Hu Guang, and attracted the cultivators of the three-world island. The battle was coming to an end, but there was one thing that was not perfect. Therefore, from Lu Ye's point of view, he had to kill Lionheart to give an explanation to Wei Pe and Luan Xiao who died in front of him. Since he recognized Hu Shui's identity, he naturally knew the consequences of killing this woman. However, there were some things in this world that could not be avoided even if one knew they could not be done. Moreover, he felt that Hu Shui should not have reached the level of facing death with equanimity. Therefore, he had to show his attitude, only then could he intimidate the other party. The Pan Mountain saber pressed against the other party's slender neck. Lu Ye's killing intent was awe-inspiring, and the words that came out of his mouth were like ancient ice, chilling to the bone. Hu Shui blinked. Seeing the determination in Lu Ye's eyes, she realized that the other party was not trying to scare her. If she did not release the battle stage, this young man would probably really kill her. Of course, she could also take a gamble. Perhaps the other party was just trying to scare her. With Yuan Du standing behind her, would there really be anyone who dared to kill her on the 10,000 manifestation sea? How should she choose? Even with Hu Shui's nimbleness, she was caught in a dilemma. Seeing that Lu Yi was about to open his mouth again and the saber in his hand was about to continue pressing down, Hu Shui no longer dared to hesitate. She cried out in alarm, "No! Release! I'll release!" Hu Shui responded. Following the activation of her transcendence energy, the sound of silk tearing rang out, crisp and melodious. Lu Yi was stunned, staring at the snow-white figure in front of him. Hu Shui's expression became extremely bitter, as if she was about to cry. 2 inexplicable blushes even appeared on her cheeks. Due to the activation of her transcendence energy, the shadows of the 6 snow-white foxtails behind her swayed, adding a hint of wildness and seductiveness. "What are you doing?" Lu Ye's eyes drooped. Hu Shui blinked. "Didn't you ask me to release?" "I've already released." She had indeed released, but what she released was not the battle stage's restraints, but her own clothes. Even though Lu Yi had experienced countless battles, he had never experienced such an outrageous thing. In the midst of a battle of life and death, when the long saber was about to take her life, such a delicate woman suddenly had her clothes torn apart. This matter was indeed somewhat outrageous. Hu Shui withdrew her seductive manner and suddenly covered her mouth as she chuckled. "Oh? Are you asking me to unlock the battle platform? Why didn't you say so earlier? Looks like I misunderstood." "Alright, I'll undo the seal right now." A hint of provocation flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes. "I dare to undo it, but do you dare to let me undo it?" Lu Yi finally understood what this woman was up to. If Hu Shui were to release the battle platform at this moment, then the state of the two would immediately appear before the eyes of the cultivators in the outside world. At that time, when the bystanders saw this scene, what would they think? What would Yuan Du think if the news reached his ears? The Guardian of Sunshine was not allowed to interfere in the battle for the spiritual island. This was the rule of the Wanxiang Sea, unless one of the parties requested for arbitration. Therefore, even if Lionheart fled to the Wanxiang Island, Yuan Du would not personally appear. He only sent Yuan Cheng to receive him. But if the matter of Lu Yi of the Three-World Island bullying the weak and humiliating Hu Shui was exposed, then Yuan Du would have a reason to intervene. Even if he killed Lu Yi on the spot, no one would say anything. Any man with a bit of courage would not be able to remain indifferent when his woman was being bullied like this. This was a matter of a man's pride and dignity, especially when Yuan Du was a strong cultivator in the Sunshine State. The battle stage was sealed. Who knew what would happen between a man and a woman in there? At that time, Hu Shui only needed to add fuel to the fire and Lu Yi would die no matter how many lives he had. As this thought flashed through his mind, Lu Yi began to admire the female demon in front of him. Under such circumstances, she could actually come up with a countermeasure so quickly. He had to admit that she was quick-witted. Restraining his killing intent, he said, "I've long heard that the Six-Tailed Fox clan is cunning and changeable. You really live up to your reputation." "Thank you for the compliment." Hu Shui pursed her lips and smiled. She raised 2 fingers and placed them on the body of the mountain blade that was pressed against her neck. Gently pushing it away, she stood up leisurely, not caring that her body was exposed. The 6 tails behind her danced even more enchanting. "I don't have any other requests. You and I will wait here for 30 breaths. I will release the battle stage and set you free. Of course, I won't tarnish your reputation. I don't want to expose myself in public like this, so you can rest assured. To save Lionheart, is it worth it?" Lu Yi looked at her. Hu Shui's expression became melancholy. "Of course it's worth it." She looked at Lu Ye's several clones and said with interest, "Your cloning technique is very mysterious. What a pity." What? Hu Shui turned to look at Lu Yi. What she saw was an extremely bright blade light. Hu Shui's expression changed drastically. She only had time to cry out in alarm before the resplendent blade light enveloped her. When the saber light dissipated, Hu Shui also disappeared without a trace. Only a cloud of blood mist was left behind. Within the blood mist, a pink Yao core and a few storage rings were extremely conspicuous. Lu Yi put away his blade, his expression as calm as water. The 6 treasured blood clones turned back into treasured blood and returned to his main body. At the same time, the surrounding scenery collapsed rapidly. This undoubtedly meant that the shackles of the battle stage had been released with Hu Shui's death. If possible, he actually didn't want to kill Hu Shui, just like he didn't want to kill Yuan Cheng and Zixian. Because these 2 people were too close to Yuan Du, killing them would definitely cause trouble. However, Hu Shui's response, which she thought was clever, forced Lu Yi to kill her. Although Hu Shui had promised that she wouldn't tarnish his reputation when she released the battle stage, which undoubtedly meant that she would wear her clothes before releasing the battle stage, Lu Yi didn't dare to believe it so easily. After interacting with Hu Shui for a short while, Lu Yi had already deeply experienced this woman's cunning. Who knew which words from her mouth were true and which were false? If Hu Shui still maintained this appearance and released the battle stage, he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he opened his mouth. Therefore, there was only one thing Lu Yi could do, which was to kill and destroy the corpse. Hu Shui had already turned into a burst of bloody mist. Who knew whether she was wearing clothes or not? As for whether it would anger Yuan Du, that was certain. However, Hu Shui attacked him first, so it was reasonable for him to counterattack and kill the enemy. Even Yuan Du couldn't find fault with it. He chose the lesser of 2 evils. Killing Hu Shui was better than being slandered by her. As for the trouble that would follow, he already had a grudge with Yuan Du. Zixian's targeting of the 3 Realms Island had Yuan Du's shadow. Would there be any less trouble? After collecting the Yao core and several storage rings left behind by Hu Shui, his eyes lit up. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he had already reappeared on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, still at the position where he had disappeared. There was also a treasure beside him, which was Hu Shui's battle stage. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. The battle stages of the 9 continents were one-time consumable treasures, but the battle stages in the starry sky weren't. They could be used multiple times. Lu Yi hurriedly raised his head and looked forward, but Lionheart was nowhere to be seen. He abruptly turned around and saw a tall and sturdy figure standing on the 10,000 Elephant Island. His aura was weak and his face was extremely pale. Who else could it be but Lionheart? Lu Yi clenched his teeth. He was still one step too late. He didn't spend too much time fighting with Hu Shui, and he didn't hesitate to kill her. However, Lionheart still entered the 10,000 Elephant Island. This meant that the assassination attempt had failed completely. Lu Yi glared at Lionheart with eyes that were about to spit fire. Yuan Cheng stood beside Lionheart. At this moment, Yuan Cheng's face was filled with horror. He looked behind Lu Yi and searched around, obviously looking for Hu Shui, but how could he find her? Although he already had a guess, he couldn't help but ask, Lu Yi, where's Hu Shui? Lu Yi ignored him and pointed his mountain pan saber at Lionheart. You'd better hide in there for the rest of your life. Lionheart had entered the 10,000 Elephant Island. He couldn't kill his way in. That was no different from courting death. However, Lionheart couldn't hide here forever. If he dared to leave the 10,000 Elephant Island one day, it would be his death. He sheathed his saber and turned around to leave. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat as a great danger descended from the sky. Without thinking, he hurriedly channeled his spiritual energy to connect with the red talisman in his body. When he killed Hu Shui, he had already foreseen this scene. After all, Hu Shui was one of Yuan Du's most beloved concubines. It was impossible for Yuan Du to not react when she was killed. As it turned out, Yuan Du had indeed come. Since he had foreseen this scene, how could Lu Yi not react? The red talisman in his body was his trump card. If he wanted to escape from Rizhao, he had to channel the power of the red talisman. As long as he could avoid Yuan Du here, he could survive. He killed Hu Shui because the other party attacked first, and he retaliated. It happened in front of everyone's eyes. There was no way to fake it. However, Yuan Du came in a rage. His fist was not as hard as the others, so Lu Yi naturally had to avoid him. If Yuan Du continued to pursue him, it would be a violation of the rules they had set. At that time, the other 10,000 elephant sea guardians would most likely not sit by and watch. It could even be said that Yuan Du's arrival at this moment had already broken the rules. Of course, to the 10,000 elephant sea guardians, everyone else was outsiders, while Yuan Du was one of them. Even if they wanted to uphold the rules here, it was still possible for them to react a little slower. And that little delay was enough for a Rizhao to take Yu Yao's life. Therefore, Lu Yi couldn't and didn't dare to entrust his life to others. Yuan Du's Rizhao's aura spread out. Before he arrived, his aura was already as heavy as a mountain, making it difficult to breathe. Lu Yi had already activated the power of the red talisman. Just as he was about to activate it, he suddenly felt another Rizhao's aura spreading out from another direction on the 10,000 Elephant Island. The pressure brought by Yuan Du's aura was instantly swept away. Then a third aura. Lu Yi couldn't help but be surprised. How did the 10,000 Elephant Island's Rizhao react so quickly? Originally, he thought that even if Yuan Du broke the rules, the other Rizhao would just turn a blind eye and let Yuan Du vent his anger first. He didn't expect that there would be someone who really wanted to uphold the rules. This surprised him greatly. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.